Going live. Says we're going live. You are live, so I'm assuming we are live. Welcome, everyone.
Hey.
This is On Just Restart. This is the Sunday night podcast we usually do on this channel. Usually around 9 p.m. Eastern time, give or take 3 minutes. So, yeah, here we are. This time, as the title may suggest, we're going to be talking about Breath of the Wild 2. Pretty much entirely. We might do a couple little things between the Q&A. We'll talk about a few other quick little things right now, but we're gonna be focused mostly on The Legend of Zelda, or the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. We got that trailer, that update trailer, that second teaser trailer for the game, like what, a week and a half ago? Yeah, June 15th. That was 12 days ago. So
Damn.
yeah, that's what we're focusing on today, talking about that trailer and everything that's sort of surfacing from it. And I got two friends of mine here who also love Zelda as well to kind of talk about this. Here at the top right, we got Cameron from GameBird Classic. How you doing, buddy?
What is up? Glad to be back. Ready to talk Zelda. I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I am good. It's always good to have you, man.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also always good to have Don from MonsterMaze. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing good. Well, I'm a bit tired because I just put up a video and that edit kind of wrecked me, but I'm good. I'm excited to talk about Zelda with you. I always enjoy it. There's like magic happening every time I'm on the on the podcast.
I feel like there's always potential for us to figure something out, right? There's always potential. And we sort of touched on it, right? Like right before we went live, because as you noted, like we both were kind of talking about like, hey, what if the next game is in the sky?
And it's in the sky.
And it's in the sky. It kind of made sense, right? Like, I guess, like, when you think about it, it made sense because, well, if you look at Breath of the Wild, it is open air. That's the terminology Nintendo likes to use with it, right? They're trying to go beyond just the open world concept, open air. The implication being that there's more you can do within that world. It's a little bit more interactive, and perhaps there's a little bit more verticality to it as well. Perhaps that's also an insinuation there. But with that in mind, and you see all the things you can do in Breath of the Wild with scaling the mountains and the different little techniques that people have come up with going through the sky, you would think that a natural evolution would be to do even more in the sky, right? So what happened?
Literal.
They were just like, let's do more in the sky. And
well, if you think about it, like a lot of people, of course, because of the first trailer, a lot of people were talking about, hey, it's going to be underground. We're going to be exploring caves. But the engine of Breath of the Wild would be very much wasted if you only have stuff underground mostly. So, like, you know, it's open air. You have that freedom. A cave, you don't have a lot of ways to go. Like you cannot go up, at least not much. So this makes perfect sense, and we did see a few small glimpses of something underground, but we'll get into that later when we get into the actual theorizing. But this was a very logical decision.
It made sense, and Nintendo agreed this time, so we were right this time. But actually, Don, you noted that you just finished a video, which I did get to see, by the way, and I also saw the collaboration counterpart as well, because you collabed with Zeltic. So you guys put out two really good Zelda theory videos. So I definitely recommend you guys check that out. Don's channel is linked in the description below, MonsterMaze. He just put out that video, and I thought it was really, really interesting. I don't know if you want to spoil everything in that video, but there's definitely some pretty good takes, I think, that were there that certainly put a nice spin on everything we've sort of seen so far for the game.
Oh yeah, no, we can definitely talk about it, because there's so much exposition and details you have to explain, because like the whole idea behind this theory was because one of my Patreon supporters came to me and he was like, hey, what if Ganondorf wasn't really like sealed? Like all of us were thinking like, oh, he's trapped there because he's always trapped in some way. Like that's kind of Zelda tradition. Like Ganon or Ganondorf, whatever his form is, he's always sealed, and then at some point he breaks free again or he gets resummoned by someone. But you know, that causes us to think like, oh, it's a seal again. He's trapped in that cave. But he was like, what if it was a deliberate decision by him? Because, you know, if you really think about it, he's in a really good position, story-wise. You know, he
Yeah.
doesn't have to worry about what's gonna happen to him. Like his physical body is safely hidden away underground somewhere, and he can just wreak havoc with his malice above ground, and he will never be in actual mortal danger himself. Because we saw at the end of Breath of the Wild how Zelda seals Calamity Ganon, but that doesn't really do much. All she is doing is sealing a part of his malice away, but he's still safely on the ground, you know?
Yeah. He's just been hiding there. But you know, I really kind of appreciated how, I guess I wasn't even aware of this. Like, I mean, I've heard of it before, but like I've never gotten that much information about the lich. Is that how you pronounce it, or the lich?
Lich, yeah.
Lich, like, and that's something from, I guess, well, you know, medieval dark fantasy as a whole, but you took a lot of information from Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah.
And kind of considering that concept, and as you were like talking about it in your video, it was like, oh, that's exactly what Ganondorf is. Like, it makes perfect sense.
Like, liches are very old school fantasy D&D stuff, but you know, there's an argument to be made. Like, obviously, when it comes to fantasy, people will always be like debating whether something is or isn't like true. For instance, Sauron from Lord of the Rings, I consider him to be a lich as well. Like, he's basically immortal. His one weakness is an object. His soul, his entire life energy has been bounded to the One Ring. Same with Voldemort from the Harry Potter series.
Yeah. He's got 7.
In his in his case, his soul is bounded to 7 objects in total. So, you know, there's always creative liberty, and maybe it's not like classic textbook lich, but I did say that in one of my comments as well. I doubt Nintendo is gonna actually name him, like call it by name. I don't think they're gonna actually call him out as a lich in the game, because that's not how Nintendo goes. You know, they tend to stay away from like, the classic.
They don't call re-dead zombies stuff. Right? They don't do that.
Well, in general, like that's why we don't have elves and dwarves. That's why we have Gorons and Zora. They like to come up with their own version of it. They're not doing the classic World of Warcraft stuff, so to speak.
But at the same time, though, like, it's very clear that The Legend of Zelda is, you know, a fantasy medieval style game. And, you know, sometimes there are exceptions within that rule. There are sci-fi elements thrown in and things of that nature, right? Like, I was joking earlier, but, you know, what if this game does have space elements, right? Like, there was the concept art with UFOs and things of that nature. Like, those things are out of the question, but the root of Zelda is very fantasy medieval. And with that in mind, obviously, well, maybe not obvious, but I feel like it's pretty fair to say that Nintendo has always taken inspiration from a lot of those fantasy medieval tropes. And another one could be the Lich. Like, that's not really, I don't think that's at all a stretch. Perhaps they would take inspiration from that. They take inspiration from all sorts of things. That's just kind of part of game design, right? You look for inspiration elsewhere, something that people already kind of like, and they can find something that they relate to in the game, you know? Like, I think, I don't know if I remember correctly, like with Ocarina of Time, they studied, like, I forget the exact name, but they were studying, like, theatrical sword fights of samurais. And that played a heavy inspiration with the combat system in Ocarina of Time. And it was cool. really cool, you know? So, like,
I didn't know that.
Really cool.
Don't quote me exactly. It's something along those lines. Maybe not specifically, like, there's some sort of name, but the point is they did do something like that, where they did research, they were examining different combat styles and ways to present it in a theatrical way, and they employed that into Ocarina of Time. And it made sense because, you know, they were creating the first 3D Zelda, and they had to envision how they would sort of do the combat in a 3D environment. A lot of that also has to do with the Z targeting, but, you know, there was a lot there. So looking at the lore for Zelda, there's a lot of tropes that do match up with other fantasy medieval tropes. So I don't think it's at all a stretch to think that maybe that Ganondorf will fall under that definition of a lich. I mean, I think we pretty much already have, like, that's what it is. He basically is already. So yeah, I think it works.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what do you think, Cameron?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're gonna identify him as a lich, but that's clearly what he is. My big question is this gonna be his form throughout the adventure, or is he gonna reclaim more and more of his human
Rehydration.
form,
Yeah.
as the game progresses? That's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah, I mean, that would automatically not make him a classic lich because liches cannot go back to their original human form. But that's why I said like Nintendo's obviously going to take creative liberty with that.
Right.
On one hand, I'm like, well, maybe he will just stay like this. This is just the new Ganondorf for this story, and maybe at the end he will be killed for good, and it's going to be a new era of Zelda game because they cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again for the rest of eternity. They clearly wanted to take a new direction with Ganondorf / Ganon because
that would be pretty big. I mean, that would be really something really big for the series to finish off Ganondorf, like you said, once and for all, and kind of set the stage for a new era of Zelda. I mean, it would be an epic moment, one that I think would be a little divisive with fans, but one, if done really well, I'd be all for it. I think that would be cool. Give some finality,
Yeah, for sure. I actually want to go back to your point about how Ganondorf may be changing a little bit. But first, I want to say hello to people in the chat. People have been rolling in. So let's give everyone a good greeting. See they got any good points or questions they want us to get to here. Hello, everyone. DE Fox, thank you for modding, my friend. Nishant Kelkar, excited for this one. Us as well. Cody Bell, love the channel. After Breath of the Wild 2, do you feel like open world Zelda is here to stay, or will they ever go back to a more linear path type Zelda? I think open air style Zelda is the natural evolution of the mainline Zelda, and there will be elements from previous Zeldas that they will bring back and forth. I think we've all speculated that this game may be slightly more linear than Breath of the Wild 1, and if not slightly more linear, they'll at least bring back some components from previous Zelda games, like perhaps more dungeons that are closer to the classical style dungeons. Maybe they won't be exactly like it, but perhaps they'll have items, as we've seen some evidence for already. So, I think moving forward, expect open air style, but some elements will come back and forth, and they'll sort of mix it up over time. But that's what I sort of expect from the series moving forward. What do you guys think?
I agree with you. I think after everything they achieved with the first game, it's really hard to kind of jump back to something more linear, like Skyward Sword, for example. But I mean, they do have their 2D Zelda line that they could stick to that kind of format with. I think, like you said, bringing back some of the staples of the Zelda series that were maybe lost in Breath of the Wild, stuff like dungeons and traditional items, maybe a more present storyline, are things that they can add into the game while still keeping it open air. And I hope to see more of those kind of staples that we've all come to know and love throughout the series trickle their way back in.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think, Don? Do you think open air is the way Zelda is going to be moving forward, or do you think they'll go back to the more traditional 3D Zelda?
I think for a while, yes. I think this will be the direction they want to take it in, at least for now. But I think also at the same time, it might be a little bit like fashion, like how something stays the same for a while and then it gets stagnant and then they make it like a new, who knows, like 10 years from now, they might go back to the Skyward Sword formula and be like, we've broken the convention again. It's we're gonna go back to the linear Zelda. There's always like an answer to something. If something can only go on for so long until it starts to become samey. And normally they've kind of gotten around that by having like a gimmick per new game, but usually it's not enough. But you know, who knows where gaming is in like 10 years from now? Maybe we'll have virtual reality Zelda and everything's gonna be like completely different.
Maybe we'll
again.
be there by that point. I feel like virtual reality, like where it taps into our brain, we just wear a helmet and we feel everything.
Plug in.
That may never happen, right? But if it does happen, maybe not 10 years, right? Maybe like 50. I don't know. Or maybe Nintendo's be like, you know what, this technology exists. Let's just dive headfirst into this and see what happens. That would be
or augmented.
Yeah.
You know, augmented reality, or like they already kind of experimented with Mario Kart.
I remember, like, I'm trying to remember when it was, but you know how I'm talking about, like probably 10 years ago, a long time ago, but I remember there was like, there's always like that speculation about the next gen Nintendo system, right? Especially during the end of the GameCube era and the end of the Wii era, and also of course the end of the Wii U era, because all of those systems in their last year or so, they didn't have that many games. So a lot of Nintendo fans were like, didn't have much to do but speculate on the next big system, right? So there was a lot of crazy ideas. I remember there was this one crazy idea for a next gen system where you'd get the system and it was going to be this uber powerful, mega, super incredible system, but it would also have the ability to sort of project holograms around your television, like augmented reality complementing the main screen.
I remember seeing something like that.
Yeah.
I think I remember seeing something like that.
Yeah. So like the system would
in like your entire room.
Right. And it would, I guess, enhance the experience, right? Like, I guess just some ideas from that sort of crazy speculation at the time. Like, imagine like you're playing Metroid Prime and you're in Talon 4 and the main screen has the main parts of the gameplay, but maybe you see like rain still kind of falling around in your room somehow, right? And you see like one of the little like I forget the name of it, but it's not a Metroid, but like the little spiky things that kind of walk around, like you can't actually shoot them from that perspective, right? But they're just kind of there, and it just kind of like enhances the atmosphere, right? Or imagine if it's like Zelda and like you're running through the fields in Breath of the Wild and you just see all the blades of grass around you as you're like moving forward. Like that would be a really interesting idea. I don't think it's feasible because I have a hard time believing they could get some sort of projector that could really produce that kind of like crazy augmented reality like visuals without like monitors everywhere. But you know, there were crazy ideas like that in the past, and I mean, who knows what the future holds.
I'm pretty sure Nintendo patented some idea for a device that projects a display in your bedroom, and it just looked like so many patents, just never turned into anything.
Right.
But
Yet.
I think they at least patented the idea of something similar to what you're describing.
Yeah, but maybe it wasn't really that good.
To that extent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, who knows where we are like a few decades from now. Like
Right,
10
there'll be
years
like
was a
2
bit
more
lenient.
Zeldas, but maybe we'll only get 1 more Zelda 10 years from now.
Yeah, we never know. Well, they
dare say that.
They're all taking
They only
like 5 to 6 years, so.
Yeah, they're like that's the one thing, you have like 2 Zelda games per decade nowadays. We used to have more back when they were making the 2D games every 2 years or so, but they kind of stopped. It's a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
I like the 2D games.
Yeah, the 2D games are great. I mean, we got Link's Awakening Remake, which I enjoyed very much, but I would like them to, and that was Grezzo. So I would love it if they were to actually make a new 2D Zelda. But you know, actually, on that note, and I know there's more things that I want to get to, but just putting this out there, we've seen Metroid Dread, and what is the story behind Metroid Dread? We talked about it for years, right? Hey, look, Mercury Steam, the Spanish team that remade the Metroid 2 for the 3DS that came out in 2017. Even though it didn't sell amazingly well, Nintendo was still okay with it. There was a lot of excitement about the game from the staff and the developers. We saw that in interviews. The game reviewed very well. A lot of Metroid fans really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. They did a great job with that remake. Nintendo outsourced it to them. They did really good. And then fast forward 4 years later, and now we have arguably the most hyped game from Nintendo in 2021, Metroid Dread, made by the same team in conjunction with Nintendo and Yoshio Sakamoto, but Nintendo decided to trust them with that. And
Yep.
Grezzo's been doing a lot of Zelda stuff, a lot of remake stuff, and they just made a full-blown remake of Link's Awakening that has some reimagined stuff. Like there's new content in there, right? A whole new visual engine and such. Maybe they are building up Grezzo to eventually take up a lot of the development load for the 2D games. And obviously, the big Zelda team and Eiji Aonuma will still have a role in that the same way Nintendo and Sakamoto have with Metroid. But Grezzo could potentially maybe become like that dedicated 2D developer. Like, what if?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think they're well equipped. I'd love to see more Zelda from them.
yeah, I agree. I mean, they did a similar thing with Capcom back in the day. Like Capcom was like they made like 3, or if you also count
Oracle
4
of
Swords.
Ages and Seasons. Oh, they did 4 Swords as well. And then they gave them Minish Cap.
Minish Cap as well, yeah.
Yeah.
And then at some point, Hidemaru Fujibayashi was taken on board. He was ex Capcom before. He was basically just adopted by Nintendo. Where you're like, all right, we're gonna just put you on the Zelda projects now because apparently they loved his directing and his storytelling and stuff. And you can see his influence in the newer games pretty well because he also wrote Skyward Sword. And lo and behold, in Breath of the Wild, and probably in Breath of the Wild 2 as well, we see a lot of like Skyward Sword imagery coming back.
A great deal. But I'm gonna try and get through the chat, and then we'll come back to the discussion. There's so much we can kind of go in with Zelda, right?
Oh.
But
Yeah.
let me see here. Super Chris, hello there. Thank you for modding, my friend. Ronnie Fazio, hello there. iSonic, hello. Joycey, yeah, we're gonna be talking about all Zelda all night. Taker610, thank you very much for the super chat. Did Andres go easy on himself with dubious food? Huh. It was not easy. I spent all day working on that food. And there was a lot of planning that went into it, and I had a lot of help. And I don't know if you got to see the video, but I ate a lot. I was starting to get queasy. So I don't think I went easy on myself. My friend tried eating it and she couldn't do it. Like, so, you know, I ate a lot of it, I think. But, yeah, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's on the channel. But I did it. The dubious food was made and I ate it because, yes, I was wrong about the release date for Breath of the Wild 2. But I will contend that everyone is pretty much wrong about the release date for Breath of the Wild 2 because I don't even think that's coming out March. I'd love to be wrong, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Gotta say, I appreciated the effort you put into that. Like, I'm gonna eat dubious food, but when I saw the picture of it, I was like, wow, he actually went above and beyond for that.
Yeah, you really outdid yourself with the presentation of the dish.
I had a lot of help.
Yeah.
My friend was a really good baker, so we were able to pull it off.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm glad you guys thought it was cool.
Yeah, amazing.
Just watching you take a chunk of like the bone, and you just had like the big chunk of it in your hand was great.
Yeah, it was made out of fondant, and it was like it's used in like wedding cake and stuff, and maybe a little bit tastes good, but when you're having something that weighs like 2 pounds of like just straight condensed like sugar, no. And there was a lot of grease put on there too to kind of smooth that out. And then we made sure to put a lot of extracts that made it taste like either medicine or like beef soy sauce, and it was not a normal cake. I feel like we really hit the description of dubious, which doesn't inherently mean not edible. You can eat it, but it's questionable. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
What was the choo-choo made out of?
Jello.
Was that just jelly?
It was just Jello. Yeah, I just
Okay.
my friend was like, oh, what if you did one of those like choo-choo things? Like, oh, okay, let's do it. It just seemed like a nice little thing to put in there to kind of make it feel more Zelda-like.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
That was really cool.
it was a frozen one, so it didn't go down smooth. It was very like hard and
Really?
chunky. So it was. I didn't enjoy the Jello as much as I thought I was hoping to. Yeah. Nick Forrest here. Hey Andre, I think since dude said no more Zelda for Switch, that doesn't mean Switch Pro. I'm not sure what you're referring to. It does seem like, you know, a lot of people are kind of losing heart with the Switch situation, the revision situation. We're not gonna focus too much on that tonight. I still think it's real.
I think you might be talking about the fact that Aonuma said they were not going to do anything Zelda related the rest of this year because of the anniversary stuff. You know, people had high expectations, like, oh, Ocarina of Time bundle with Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, and they flat out said, like, we're not doing any more for this year. Sorry, guys.
I don't see a game coming out from Nintendo this year that seems to be the kind of game that they would use to push hardware, right?
No.
So it does kind of leave me thinking, are we just not getting the hardware this year? And not necessarily, right? Because if this system is about enhancing already existing experiences, then maybe they go with that. Like, they just really present it as a system that enhances all your previous experiences, and they have a lot of patches for already existing Switch games like Smash Brothers and Mario Kart and Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, and all of those games look and run better. Xenoblade, like, all of those games can look and run better on this more beefed up system. And while I don't expect any brand new games to be announced that are like full retail priced unless it's for like next year, like, we know the lineup for this year. Like, anyone who thinks that we might get like another big $60 game from Nintendo, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because by this point in the year, by the time we get that E3 presentation, we know, and that's it. We have games for August, September, October, November, December. It's a decent lineup, but nothing that would be, I would think, would warrant as a like system selling kind of game. Maybe Metroid Dread, you know, like, maybe not that alone, but with patches for a whole bunch of games. Maybe they announce like a DLC for something. Like, what if they announce, like, hey, you know, we're gonna have a 4K update for Mario Kart Deluxe, but here's a couple extra Grand Prix. Like, that'd be pretty cool. You know, maybe something like that, where it's like, hell, you know, but nothing brand new. So it could conceivably still happen this year, I think. Based off reports, I do believe it's real. I do think it's happening. It's really just a matter of when, and maybe it does come out next year. And then when next year, that's a whole other discussion, because, yeah, I would say Breath of the Wild 2 would be a great game to push with that. That's how Nintendo usually uses Zelda to push systems. But then, but if it comes out next year, at that point, we're already talking about 5 years into console's life cycle. Is this really a mid-gen refresh? Is this a next-gen system? I think it's going to be a hybrid of a hybrid, but again, it's a whole other discussion. But basically, to sum it up, I think the next revision is going to function somewhat like a next generation system, but still be a mid-gen refresh at the same time. In other words, your base Switch is still going to be compatible with new Nintendo games coming out for the next few years still, even with this revision coming out, but it's going to be a nice little boost that will lengthen the lifespan and maybe market it as like the next big thing. But that's just speculation. There's too many variables.
Drift.
And fixed Joy-Con drift. That might be its perhaps biggest innovation, but we'll see. We shall see. Nick Forrest here has another question. I think Demise, well, not a question, just a statement. I think Demise will be in Breath of the Wild sequel. I think there will be like, I don't think specifically Demise himself will be in the game in a humanoid form that you could fight against, but I do feel like there's going to be at least some sort of background lore or homage paid to the character. Like, I do think there will be some influence of Demise there. I mean, the very fact that Ganondorf exists, I think, is already paying homage to Demise, because the whole point of Demise, not to spoil too much, but basically Demise is like the initial Demon King, and he kind of curses Link and Zelda for generations to sort of face off his hatred, and that hatred is what it's pretty much the embodiment of what Ganondorf is now, and with the Calamity Ganon, it's a physical representation of that hatred of Demise. So I feel like already it's kind of being sort of noted, but, you know, maybe there's something more to it than that. What do you guys think?
Isn't Ganondorf, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't he supposed to be kind of a reincarnation of Demise? Just in
an incarnation, yeah.
Incarnation, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says an incarnation of my hatred will forever follow your bloodline or something like that.
Yes.
So
yes,
yeah, I agree with you, Andre. I don't think we're gonna see him as Demise as we saw him in Skyward Sword. It just doesn't really make sense. He's first of all he's trapped in the Master Sword and stuff. Sorry, but yeah, like there could be definitely a reference to him because we also heard Fi in the Master Sword in Breath of the Wild, and Fi and Demise are practically in the sword together, like the roommates inside the Master Sword. But yeah, Ganondorf is there, so it's not really necessary. But it could at least explain how Ganondorf came to be. And I know there's some people who hope that there's going to be like a redemption arc for Ganondorf. I don't think that's going to happen.
I think
to be
this
honest.
is like the anti-redemption arc for Ganondorf. It's like, oh, you thought I was evil? No, I'm way more evil than you could have imagined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, just the way he's kind of being portrayed in the limited amount of time we've seen him through these couple of teasers. It really feels like this is like an embodiment of evil, you know?
Yeah.
So
Like this is
I
about
don't
as dark
see-
as it gets for Ganondorf. It looks like.
I feel like the closest thing to a redemption arc is Wind Waker, obviously, when, you know,
Yeah.
you have that moment with him at the end of the game and he's kind of, you know, you're sympathizing with him a little bit, you know?
Well, I mean, I think that Ganondorf is the second closest to a redemption arc for Ganondorf. I have another contender here. You guys ready?
Let's hear it.
Groose.
Let's do it.
Groose is the first Ganondorf. Groose is the first Ganondorf,
Yeah.
and he has quite a redemption arc in Skyward Sword.
That's the plot twist.
Yeah.
Groose was in him the whole
Now,
time.
if you guys don't know what I'm sort of suggesting here, there's speculation that Groose kind of like is the initial ancestor for the Gerudo tribe because he has the trademark Gerudo red hair. He has a larger stature than everyone else, something that we see in the Gerudo. He has yellow eyes, just like the Gerudo, and he is a part of like that interesting little triangle between Link and Zelda, which we see all throughout the Zelda series, but it's between Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, except this time it's a love triangle between Groose, Link, and Zelda. Except it's more of a sort of a simpler take or a more cutesy, naive take on this triangle, right? But I do feel like there's something there, and we even do see him and his buddies fly off towards what I think is the direction of the desert, so there is some implication there that perhaps Groose is the initial ancestor of the Gerudo, meaning Groose in some way is related to Ganondorf, and he has a great redemption arc.
I think that definitely makes sense. I mean, he's the only character with red hair and yellow eyes in the like, so to speak, before everything else took place. And like, supposedly after that, they all went to live on the surface somewhere.
Yeah.
And it would fit his character too. Like, obviously he wasn't evil in the end. He was like, he did have a redemption arc, but he was a bully at the beginning, and at the end he's like, oh, well, we're gonna call this new land Groose land, you know? Like, there is an arrogance to him, and like they portray it in a funny way, but it would fit, like story-wise, it would fit that he is what do you call that? Like, distant ancestor of the Gerudo.
Yeah. And if you look at his name, like, the letters aren't far off from Ganondorf or Gerudo. Like, it has the G and the R, which I feel like some people might say that that's a stretch, but I don't think it's a stretch. I feel like it's like, hey, yeah, this guy is the beginning. Like, if Groose is that ancestor, that sort of name scheming with the G's and the R's in the Gerudo and the Ganondorf, I think that's just something that's meant to be part of, like, that culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it was intentional.
It's an awesome theory. It reminds me of the Jar Jar Binks being a Sith Lord the whole time.
Oh yeah, classic.
In that it's a great theory, and I so wish it's true. I don't know that Nintendo would ever actually link this, but I love the idea of it. I think it adds like just like a kind of a quirky, fun element to what turned into something really horrific and dark. You know?
Yeah. I mean, playing Skyward Sword, like, throughout the game, I was always afraid because, like, yeah, Groose started off as a bully, right? But as he progresses, he does have this redemption arc, right? Like, he kind of has his own misfortunes. He starts to buddy up with Link and Impa, or Old Lady Impa, which we don't know is Impa at the time. Oof, I hope I'm not spoiling too much, but anyway, point is that Groose turns out to be a kind of a swell guy, but of course not perfect, right? As you noted, he still has a little bit of an arrogance about him, but it's kind of like an endearing arrogance by the end, right? But you know, I was always afraid throughout Skyward Sword, getting towards the end, that something bad was gonna happen to him. Like, I was worried that the evil would, like, consume Groose, and then that would be, like, the first Ganondorf. Like, that was the fear, because he does seem to have a lot of similarities to Ganondorf. So, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it would make sense, because the only two crucial characters that, like, when they step out of that portal after they've dealt with Demise, are Link, Zelda, and Groose.
Yeah.
They're the only three there, and Zelda has been infused with the goddess bloodline, so the goddess Hylia has basically housed her powers in her, and for the rest of eternity, she's gonna carry that power with her. It would definitely not be out of the realm of possibility that Demise did the same to Groose. Doesn't mean Groose was bad, but his bloodline does.
Like, he picked him. Yeah,
because he's not gonna pick Link, because you know he had
Spirit of the Hero,
the Triforce, and he's the hero. Yeah, so that's, but you know that he carries that curse into his bloodline, and then like eons from that point, Ganondorf is gonna be born from that bloodline, and it's like that's where the incarnation of his hatred starts to come from.
You could even,
my mind is being blown.
Like, it doesn't even have to be like something where like. Demise is like, oh, I'm gonna plant a seed of evil into Groose, and then generations later it will become Ganondorf. It could be something as simple as, oh, I see with this person, he has a certain arrogance about him, but also like a certain rival, energy with his rivalry towards Link that I think will benefit me in the future. So those traits that will be passed on, I think that will be a good location to pass on my Spirit of Evil, right? Like, it could be something as simple as that, where he just thinks that lineage would be better suited to sort of pick that, especially if they're going to be a tribe that deals with misfortune in the desert, and it's like something that is like it's inciting of more hatred and revenge, which builds on upon that hatred, right? Hence why we have the interesting version of Ganondorf from Wind Waker, who has that past with his people suffering in the desert. So you know,
and the three of them fit that kind of theme of the Triforce theme, the power, courage, and wisdom. Kind of works well with those three.
It's almost too perfect to not be unintentional. Also, Nick Forrest asks, are Gerudo asexual? No, they are not.
No, they marry Gorons.
Well, the whole reason why the Gerudo changed, like they were, if you remember, in Ocarina of Time, they had rounded ears and yellow eyes and stuff. But in Breath of the Wild, they all of a sudden have pointy ears, and some of them have blue eyes. Like, I don't think any Gerudo have yellow eyes in Breath of the Wild. And that's supposedly because they've been like interbreeding with Hylians for all these countless of decades.
That makes a lot of sense.
They even say it in the game that they go out of Gerudo Town to find Town to find mates or boyfriends, so to speak. And then they return again, and of course males cannot enter Gerudo Town, so that's the end of that relationship. But
very sad.
Also, I think the whole Groose thing that you mentioned before, it kind of also reminded me of Anakin, like Anakin Skywalker. Also someone who's not inherently evil, but wasn't he supposed to be like created from Palpatine? He was like, because he doesn't have a father. Sorry, going into the Star Wars lore here, but
I'm not going to pretend to be a Star Wars expert. It doesn't sound, I don't know.
But like a seed was planted into him.
Palpatine definitely nurtured him into a villain.
Yeah, he was very. He was groomed into
the
dark side.
Yeah, yeah. And like with Groose, you know, maybe he didn't suffer that fate, but we don't know because we don't know what happened after Skyward Sword.
Maybe
Because
there
by
could be a
that time,
spin-off game where we learn.
oh, that would be amazing because that's one part of their history that's almost begs explanation because you have
We need a
Skyward
sequel.
Sword. Yeah, you have Skyward
Swords.
Sword
And you get
and
two
then
Master Swords.
two
Skyward
Master Swords.
Yep.
Skyward
You forge
Swords.
your own.
Yeah, with
Skyward
a Z.
Swords. With a Z.
Yeah.
With a Z, yeah. Well, like you only have Minish Cap in between that, and
Yeah,
you know
it's a
what?
very
Well,
unexplored
and Four
history.
Swords. Yeah, it just kind of skips some details.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm gonna do a quick chat run through, and then let's. We've been going back and forth, but I just want to like get through this chat here real quick, and then we'll kind of dive, just because there's a couple things I want to like get to specifically. But and by the way, Don, I know you can't stay up as late, so whenever you need to go, just let me know, and that's cool.
Yeah,
But,
I'll go in a bit. Well, but we still have to dive into Breath of the Wild 2
yeah,
first.
we got
and the new
a
trailer.
we got stuff to talk about. But so I'm just gonna do a quick like answer off here, and then we'll get back to Q&A later. Ice Sonic, do you think Breath of the Wild 2 have underwater exploration? Yes, I do. Nishant Kelkar, kind of off topic, but did you try the Neo the World Ends With You demo? It reminds me a lot of Persona, but with some Xenoblade combat elements. I have not, but that is one heck of a combination, so I will look into that. Is this pi or p with some long line? If you inverse the color scheme of the Malice, it's the color scheme of Link's green arm and vice versa with Link's arm. I saw a Reddit post that pointed this out. There does seem to be a contrast between the Malice and the green sort of energy. So I definitely think there is some sort of contrast comparison there for sure.
Yeah. Isn't it like the main consensus right now is that the blue energy that we see in Breath of the Wild mostly is like represents wisdom because it's like from the Sheikah and they're like wise, and the green energy is courage, and Malice is power because it's red.
Right. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, right? Like, because like with the Sheikah stuff, we see a lot of the blue swirls. To your point, like that's maybe the wisdom, right? And then maybe now we learn more about the Triforce of Courage and the Pharaoh region and the Zonai potentially, and that green magic. Maybe it's all connected, right? And then also, like you said, maybe we finally see the Triforce of Power surface as well, and Ganondorf and all of that. Like this is all this. I think this all is super related to what we're about to talk about. So just
Yep.
a couple more things and we'll jump into it. Roddy Fazio, what are your thoughts on Nintendo investing in Forever Entertainment, and what IPs would you like to see them remake? Are they the ones that are bringing Cruise and Blast, if I remember correctly? I don't know too much about it, but I'll tell you that I love Cruisin' USA. I thought Cruisin' World was really good, and it's nice to see an arcade racer. I don't know if the funding and polish is there for Cruisin' Blast. It doesn't appear like it's gonna be super high quality. I hope I'm wrong. I'm not saying it won't be. I'm just saying I'm not convinced it will be. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. I hope it's good. Yeah, there could be something there. We'll see how it turns out.
Man, I have such good memories of Cruising the World for some reason. I played that game a lot on the N64.
There were so many good like arcade racers back in the day. That was one of my favorite ones. Yeah, super good. Swift SVT, for the sequel style, what do you think of Legend of Zelda Fallen Time? That I kind of like the wording there. Can't say for sure, but I don't know. What if it's something related to the Sacred Realm? I don't know. But I see Yellow Kazoo is in the chat. Hello there, Kazoo. Thank you for modding, my friend, or just hanging out. Good to see you. But all right, let's dive into the trailer stuff because there's so much to sort of touch on. And Don is a little bit limited in time. So one thing I wanted to show off, because this is kind of going back to something you brought up, Cameron. I just wanted to show this. So guys, I'm just putting up a picture of Link just so I can transition to my editor to show you some frames. But all right,
Yep,
hopefully you guys see that there. So you were mentioning how he's very like Ganondorf in the trailer is very zombie-like, right? Well, like in the initial trailer, we do have that one shot. I put it up on the stream here where it's a flashback almost. It looks like, and he looks a lot more robust. That. It does seem to be
there's muscle and like know, there's a full body there. He's not like that shriveled up lich form.
Yeah, and he still has a nose.
That
he doesn't have anymore.
He has a trademark long nose. Yeah. I think this is at least some sort of hint towards a flashback story we're going to learn about. Like, I think we're going to learn about his history here. I feel like that's what this shadow is suggesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
I'm
so too.
so interested in who this character is that's reaching out towards him.
Yeah.
That's obviously because Ganondorf is a big dude. And this other character is like obviously monstrous. Unless this is just very using imagery to show, something even more powerful.
Right. Well, I mean,
stylized.
maybe he gets to become something like this in the future, right? Like maybe he does have like a bit of a return to form. I kind of like the demon-looking zombie version, right? Like there's something very dark about that. So if he rejuvenates and gets to like look to be like something of a living human, I don't know how I feel about that. But maybe there could be some sort of cross there. Like in flashbacks, we see him in his human form, right? Maybe there's some sort of time travel or at least like memories that you uncover. And maybe he does still build up a little bit, but still kind of retains a lot of like that very lich or zombie-like, demon-like sort of form. That's a bit of a mixture. So he becomes a little bit bigger and more menacing, but, he still has that very dark design. And actually, sorry, I was going to say this other point. It's not like Ganondorf hasn't been known to transform before. Like, what if the final fight of the game is a fight with Ganon, but it's not a very easy boss battle that's just you just shoot arrows around the giant pig that you can't miss, and maybe it's like something that's like a demon version of what we saw at the end of Ocarina of Time. It's like way more epic and really dark and epic. Like that would be really cool, and I think it's totally possible.
I was going to say, like, just from this image, like, even in his human form, there's still something kind of monstrous about him. Look at his hands. Like, his hands they almost look like vampiric.
Right.
They're
claws
huge.
Good point.
Really long fingers with the long nails coming out. And you could also tell, like, there is a new look for him because, as we saw in the new trailer, Ganondorf is wearing robes. He's wearing robes in this silhouette. The shadow.
True.
You could tell. You could see like the kind of like tunic like robes around him.
I mean, maybe he does take on more of a demonic look, right? Which could also pay some homage to Demise, who has more of a demonic look because he's a straight up demon.
Yeah. Oh my God, Demise is buff.
Yeah.
Compared to Ganondorf even. But yeah, I mean, it could be just a stylized depiction of Ganondorf, obviously, because his hands do look quite normal on the corpse. Like his hands are not like overly big there. So we don't know. Like as of right now, we don't even know if the stuff that we saw in because this is from the first trailer.
Right.
But I am generally wondering how much from that first trailer is actually going to be in the game.
Fantastic point.
It could have just been concocted for us to give us a story idea to talk about.
Right.
But I don't know why, but for some reason, parts of that new trailer, it looks like the art style is a bit more smooth, like a bit different.
Yes. The colors pop a little more in it too. It seems a little bit less washed out.
Yeah.
Trailer.
Interesting.
There's something about the art style that just there is a difference between, because some people would like, oh, it still just looks like the same game. Like, yeah, obviously it's made in the same engine, but some of the cutscenes, they have a different feel to them than what we saw in the original trailer. The original trailer was still very much using the assets, like the exact assets of Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, but I actually like the point you brought up that it almost, I'm not sure how much has changed, right? Because like you look at the opening scene with the malice sort of consuming Link's hand, how does that match up with the other scene where the green energy is like consuming Link's hand as well? Like, is it just a reimagining of that, right? And thus it's changed? Or is it two different events occurring, and how does that timeline sort of work? Because if we base it off the first trailer, right, where we see the green hand, I don't know if I can pull it up here, but
yeah, it's very different for sure.
It doesn't seem like Link's hand is like wrecked in the first trailer, right? It looks like, I mean, you could maybe make the assumption that something bad happens to his hand, but there's that.
Sorry to cut you off, but see what I mean about like go back when it's showing the malice. What I'm saying about like the colors being way more vibrant in the new trailer and popping. Compare the malice from this first trailer to the new trailer. It's like night and day.
Yeah, it's much more saturated.
Yeah. I do feel like the malice itself has a very, I mean, it's like black with red, and there is something about it that does seem a little stronger, especially here. You see it like growing. It does look like tendrils almost, which is crazy. And then there's Ganondorf actually moving, which is weird. But yeah, there's so much different things we can kind of jump to from here.
I think what you were saying before is what you were saying before. I think that is very much a possibility, that they just, they presented us the original trailer. They showed that little green energy thing going in his hand, but obviously they didn't want to give too much away, or maybe they themselves didn't even know yet which direction they were gonna take this story in. Maybe the whole part about his hand getting affected by malice was made up like after the trailer was already released, the first the reveal trailer. So because it doesn't,
you're gonna have to make another video where you have to connect the two trailers in the sequence of events.
Oh yeah, there's so many people.
If it's even possible, it might not be possible, right? Because they might have just changed it.
Well, like pretty much like 75% of the new trailer is unusable to use as a chronological edit anyway, because it's all gameplay and there's no way to know where what takes place, to be honest. Because in some parts he's wearing the champion's outfit all of a sudden. Other parts he's having that like old style clothing with his hair like no longer tied.
There seems to be a lot of time jumping almost, right? Like my impression of the trailer is, I mean, so like the beginning part where we see Zelda fall and Link presumably get his hand wrecked and lose the Master Sword, and Ganondorf doing this, like that's basically what it's around what happens with the first trailer, right? That's all kind of like the same timing, it seems like, right?
That's all in the cave and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But then my impression is that's like the inciting incident for the game, where Ganondorf is resurrected, and that's how Link loses his strength to some degree. He at least loses the Master Sword. Zelda goes missing. Maybe we don't know what that means, if she's a damsel in distress or if she has some other role with the story. I hope there's more to it, but we don't know. But Link is sure. I think everyone can kind of agree that something bad happens to Link. Like he's injured to some extent.
Yeah. You can see his arm is very much damaged by the malice. There's scarring that even bleeds into his side. And what's really cool about this is when the first Breath of the Wild came out, I loved how like there was like almost visual inspiration from Studio Ghibli's Princess Mononoke.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're doing that even more with the arm and the hand being corrupted.
The clothes.
Just something that I noticed that I thought was really cool. But yeah, he's definitely hurt.
Yeah. But I'm kind of curious what you guys think of this. Like, so I don't know. Not everyone was kind of agreed with me on this point here, but there's that one shot. I'll pull it up again. Let me see here. That is. It's Link's. It's like Link's like in his underwear. It almost seems like, right? And you get a good shot of a good look at the green hand glowing, but to me it looks like Link is lying down on some sort of like floor or table, something like that. I'm just kind of curious. I put it on stream there for other people to see, but if you look, you can see what looks to be like Link's underwear, right? Like, my opinion kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, I feel like the timing of things here, and I could be totally mistaken, just kind of want to see what you guys make of this, but we have the initial incident where Zelda's lost and Link is injured, and then something happens where Link is brought to the sky. Something saves Link from getting totally destroyed by Ganondorf and his resurrection and the rising of the castle. And I think that's what leads us to perhaps this scene here. And there's some passage of time. I don't know how much. I'm not saying it's years. It may be just a couple days, a couple weeks. I'm not sure. But Link is treated. He gets this sort of adornment on his hand, like, and maybe the green energy consumes it early on. But there's something done here where Link is treated, because it looks like he's lying down. He's not standing. He's lying down, which to me suggests some sort of rehabilitation is being done on him. And to me, that also suggests some passage of time. And you can make the argument that those long fingernails, one, you could argue, oh, his hand's somewhat demonic or something, or it's just been a long time since he's been able to clip his nails. Like, maybe he's just out for a couple months or weeks.
Yeah, I definitely think it was, my guess is that there was the scenario, his arm obviously got consumed by malice. That's starting to bleed through and corrupt. Is probably going to kill him. This almost looks like some sort of an altar. There's like inscriptions on it, and I'm wondering if there's some sort of ritual by maybe this entity, the entity that's holding on to Ganondorf's chest to save his life. I was curious if this game would feature a companion, because we obviously didn't have one in the first Breath of the Wild. And after that first trailer, I was like, oh, cool, is Zelda going to be your companion? Will she be traveling with you? Maybe she will be, maybe not. This new trailer obviously shows her falling into a dark pit. Maybe this spirit or character, maybe their spirit is in your arm and are your companion as well as the new gameplay mechanic. But I don't know, but it definitely looks like you're on some sort of an altar where some sort of ritual took place to save your life, but also give you this new ability that's going to help you on your adventure.
Yeah. Like, the biggest question we have right now is, how do we transition between what we saw in the trailer, like the cave stuff, and the sky? Because there has to be an incentive. Like you said, so maybe it has something to do with like being saved.
Yeah.
Part of his life-saving process is maybe he's taken up to the sky because that's where someone lives who's the only one who can heal his malice affliction. That could be the case. Or maybe he goes up to the sky because he needs to look for something there in order to defeat Ganondorf. Because as far as we're aware, like, Link doesn't have the Triforce of Courage in this game. Right. And some people have been speculating that maybe the part in the sky, because when you're looking at it from below, you don't see any of the floating islands at all.
Let me point that out. In the final shot, you don't see when the castle's rising, right?
Yeah, but also in the other scenes, especially the one with the bokoblins riding the stone talus.
Good point. And that one's like definitely like in the middle of the game, it seems like. Let me see if I can find that shot.
Because I'm pretty sure you're not going to get the champion's outfit until way later, because it seems like you're first going to go to this ancient outfit or something, unless that takes place before the whole Ganon thing. But that's pretty much debunked as well, because the one that you just skipped, the one with the spike ball, you can see the brace on his arm, the bracelet.
I wonder if I can see it with the bokoblins. It's hard to make out because of the shadow, but it looks like maybe darker, but definitely on the mountain, like you said, like he has the hand powers. Like that is pretty clear.
We'll probably get into this a little bit later in the discussion, but I feel like I feel like there's a lot of clues in this that there's going to be some sort of element of time jumping.
Oh, well, because there's literally this shot right here. It's just straight up time reversal of one particular object in the environment. But if you go frame by frame, going backwards here, but if you go frame by frame, the metal ball is coming down, Link pulls out his hand, and I want to point something out here that other people probably noticed, but he has a golden glow similar to how Zelda has a golden glow at the end of Breath of the Wild with the Triforce, except it's on the back of his right hand, where we've historically seen the Triforce before, and then he stops it, the metal ball, and then sends it backwards, following the path it was on previously. So, yeah, it's straight up time reversal.
The fact that he doesn't have the Triforce of Courage, like in general in Breath of the Wild, was particular, quite peculiar, because he's always had that. Every past iteration of Link had that. But yeah, like, because the whole thing, like especially in this shot, but also the one with the bokoblins, you don't see the camera is panning upwards.
Yeah,
you can clearly see the sky. It's but there's no islands there, so a lot of people have speculated similar stuff, like maybe there's a cloud barrier like in Skyward Sword.
Because you can see a sky in Skyward Sword, and there's this land above there, but you can't see it from the ground.
Yeah, it kind of works like a one-way mirror. In a way. And in this one also, like, it is weird that you don't see any of the floating islands. So maybe either it's similar to Skyward Sword, or maybe even it's a different realm altogether. And some have even speculated maybe it's like the Sacred Realm, and it goes there to collect the Triforce of Courage.
I think I like
the idea of the Sacred Realm, and
it's like, such a beautiful place. Cool. It looks like heaven.
It's gorgeous, but there's also like this kind of Greek theme in this game. You see like the shots with like Link falling from the sky, and he's got like the tunic with like the Greek sandals, and even Ganondorf has like a piece of jewelry on his hip that looks like the Omega symbol, which is interesting.
The last letter of the Greek alphabet, right?
Yep. So there's also a Greek theme, and that would be something really cool to kind of conceptualize around the sacred realm, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but it could at least be a different realm which he visits.
Yeah.
It's
because we have seen many of those before. Like even the way the Sacred Realm was depicted in the A Link to the Past manual in the artwork, it looks like a golden sky with floating islands with buildings on them. And of course we had the Twilight Realm, which was also kind of like bathed in this orange glow, had like floating islands everywhere. It's very reminiscent of that stuff.
And there's also Skyward Sword clear nods here as well. Like when you see Link falling through the sky, like that is very clearly a Skyward Sword reference.
I want to know where he's falling.
He's falling from somewhere even higher, right?
Yeah. I want to drop down from Skyloft. Like that's where I want him to be falling.
So the crazy thing is, you see how high up he is, right? If you look carefully here at this shot, you can see a little piece of giant stone tower hidden by the clouds, which you see a little bit later into the trailer. But it's just kind of like you are above this giant stone tower. Like, so just how high does it go, right? You can get a better look at a stone tower here. Like you do actually see some islands that are above it in this nighttime shot. Yeah,
I'm getting more and more convinced that this is like a different realm, either like a different realm or like something that exists above Hyrule, but you cannot see it from the floor. Because if you remember, you also have those dragons, those 3 dragons in Breath of the Wild, and they enter into some sort of portal, and they
that hole in the clouds.
And
and
maybe they're able to explore the Sacred Realm.
It's got such a, even with like the lighting in these like skylands, it's like got this very heavenly look to it, you know?
Yeah. And even the clothing, like you said, is very like Kid Icarus almost, you know, the sandals.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of videos where people make reference to the archways that look I forget the name of it. Maybe Don, you're aware of it, or Cameron.
Shinto gates.
Shinto gates, right? Which are supposed to be Torii gates. Okay. But the idea behind it is that they're meant to be like a gateway to heaven or something, right? And if this is actually a sacred realm, like it doesn't have to be specifically the realm where the Triforce is hidden, right? It could just be a land in the clouds where there's some sort of ancient civilization. Maybe not necessarily Skyloft, but something along those lines, right? Maybe there's some they maybe as you explore this land, they have references to like the city in the sky from Twilight Princess and from Skyloft and Skyward Sword, letting you know that they exist within the lore, but the lands you're exploring isn't specifically that. And it could just straight up be the sacred realm, right? Like maybe the sacred realm's just always been hidden in the skies, the land of the gods, right? It not really that much of a stretch. But what kind of fascinates me is that when we think about all the other elements, there does seem to be like a very strong potential of connections here, right? So just hear me out for a second, okay? So you have this situation in the original Breath of the Wild where the Triforce is mysteriously missing, right? We see it right at the end with Zelda, but then at the end she loses her powers, right? So throughout Breath of the Wild 2, presumably she doesn't have her powers. What's going on? That's a whole other argument, but there's that, right? But then in Breath of the Wild 2, what's interesting about it is that now things are a little different because it's no longer just Link and Zelda, it's Link, Zelda, and presumably Ganondorf, the third person of the triangle, right? Not the love triangle, but the drama triangle, whatever you want to call it, right? But they're linked throughout time, right? These three different characters. In Breath of the Wild 1, Ganondorf wasn't an element. It was just his force of nature. So the whole dynamic of the Triforce wasn't as important, but now it's a little different. And what's also more interesting is when we look at the trailer, right, as we noted earlier, there was like that golden glow on the palm of Link's hand, right? And it's coming from this new green power, which is green, as you noted earlier, Don, about how there does seem to be kind of like this theming here where there's the green that comes from the ruins of the Zonai and the Pharaoh region, which has the Feroth dragon, which is, supposed to be representative of the Triforce of Courage, which has always been linked to Link and green, right? So you got all that going there. But then looking at Ganondorf, there is like this red there when Ganondorf has always been about the Triforce of Power. And then when we go back to the Sheikah stuff, which is mysteriously missing all throughout the both trailers for Breath of the Wild 2, the Sheikah stuff had all the blue energy, right? Which has always been linked to wisdom and Nehru, right? So, and in Breath of the Wild 1, where we had all that Sheikah technology, who was the one that had all the Triforce powers? Zelda. So there does seem to be like, a potential sort of link between the three here, right? And if there is this exploration in the sacred realm, perhaps a lot of what Link is doing is sort of building up that Triforce of Courage, because now that Ganondorf is back, he needs that Triforce of Courage to fight Ganondorf this time around. So maybe a big part of the game is collecting shards of the Triforce. And that's why maybe we straight up have to go to the Sacred Realm to collect those shards.
Well, that's the interesting thing about like Calamity Ganon from the previous game. Like you didn't need to be like a destined hero in order to defeat him.
No.
Like you can defeat Calamity Ganon without the Master Sword, which already kind of hints that it has nothing to do with Ganondorf, because in previous games the Master Sword was the only thing that could actually harm him. So Calamity Ganon was just a puppet, nothing more. Just a manifestation of malice.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting because the new sky stuff, there has to be a reason why they want to go there, and like the biggest reason I can think of is that they are collecting something to fight Ganondorf. Like Ganondorf basically won for that. Like he definitely won that little encounter in the cave.
He got rid of Zelda. He got rid of the Master Sword. He broke Link's hand. He did a good job.
Yeah.
He came out on top there. So after that, like everybody's set back again, and maybe there's even a little time gap there, which would explain why the sun is in a different position in that sky footage that we saw. Could also be because it's a different realm, but you can still kind of see.
But there's a night and day cycle in the sky realm, so it'd be weird if it was like reversed. No,
I don't think it's reversed though, because we don't actually see the sun move. Like the only reason, or the only way to determine that the Earth's rotation would be reversed for some weird reason or whatever, was if the sun goes down in the what was it again? I forgot. Goes down in the east, comes up in the west, like the opposite of our real. But in the trailer, you can see that the sun, it's not necessarily shifted to the east or west. It's shifted to the south, towards the bottom sea, you know, towards the Gerudo Highlands, which is a
Interesting.
part of this. It's a part of the sky that the sun never reaches in Breath of the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have been saying because of that, people thought like, oh, the Earth's rotation has changed, but it doesn't have anything to do with the Earth's rotation. Like, the sun shifting to the south or north has something to do with the planet's tilt. You know, that's why we have summer and winter. Like, the summer arc of the sun is different than the winter arc. The winter arc is usually a
could
lot
just be a
lower
different time
and
of the
more
year.
to this. Yeah, it could just be half a year's difference. If it has, like.
But that's also
You're
you know, we don't know when Link and Zelda explore underground, right? Like, we have no.
Exactly.
They could be 2 years after the events of Breath of the Wild. They could be 2 days.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
The only
Or
clues
how
we
long
have
Link-
is. Say it again.
Or how long Link has been unconscious for
Right.
in between there.
Yeah, like, people have noted that he just doesn't have his hair tied up, so maybe his hair is not actually longer. Hard to say for sure, right? Like, we have the little nails, but again, it could be that his nails just grew because he was incapacitated for a while and needed to be, you know, his wounds need to be attended to. By the way, my theory for how he gets there, I feel like the trailer kind of tells us, because we see the water. I'll show you guys
The reverse droplet.
the reverse droplet, exactly. That it looks like, based off the way it's edited, at least, right? They can trick us, but I feel like it's an intentional clue is what I'm trying to get at here. Like, we see it's going in reverse, which it almost suggests potentially maybe some time travel, not sure, but you can clearly see the green grass from the ground level of Hyrule, and then we see it shoot up, and it looks like Link shoots up and phases through the terrain in this sky realm. I don't want to call it the sacred realm because we don't know if it's a sacred realm, but it's a realm of some kind, right? But anyways, point is that there is some sort of teleportation that seems to be going on here, or at least clearly some vertical jump that's significant and potentially all the way from the ground. And at least in the beginning of the game, this could be the mechanic you use to get to the sky. And maybe when Link's hand, maybe the timing of the events is that the red stuff does wreck Link's hand, it's injured, and maybe the first trailer isn't actually completely gone, like all the events, it's just that what we see in the first trailer, the green stuff is already covering the injury of Link's hand, so he can't tell it's injured yet, and that green energy is consuming him. Maybe he passes out, or like he uses that green energy to shoot up into the sky, and then he passes out and someone there treats him, and then weeks pass by, he's nursed back to health, and he's like, hey, so, you know, a couple weeks ago, your girl Zelda, she fell down a hole. Master Sword, gone. Ganondorf, he just took over all of Hyrule while you were out. So, we gotta do something about this, you know? Like, I that's what I can kind of... It makes sense, at least, right? So, I do think they're gonna want to start the game really fresh. Like, I don't think they want us to start in the same area. So creating an entire other realm for us to explore first, potentially the tutorial part of the game, right? Which is maybe why we only see like Link with the long hair and the sort of like Greek-like clothing in the beginning, is because this is like Link's beginning sort of getup. And
I do think. I mean, obviously, we don't know exactly when that scene with, you know, Zelda falling and Ganondorf raising the castle in the sky happens. I'm assuming it happens early. I took that shot of Ganondorf with his arms up as the moment that the castle's raising, like he's using his power. But I feel like it's going to happen early in the game. I don't think that's going to be a late thing. That's why I'm curious if there's an element of time travel in this.
To your point, Andre, what you just said before, that does make sense. That the first place we get to explore, where we actually get to control Link, is probably going to be in the sky. At least one of the earlier parts, because most of us have played Breath of the Wild. We don't have to. That would be boring, especially for players who already played the old game. They're just going to be like, "Whoa, this is just like Breath of the Wild again. It's the same world. What the heck?" Like, They have to have a quick way, like definitely for sure this part in the sky is not going to be like mid game, not even close.
I definitely think it's early game for sure, but to kind of add more credence to the idea though, right, if you look at the opening shot of this presumably gameplay, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say it's some type of gameplay footage, right? Maybe if they took off the HUD, but like they open it up with the light. Now you could argue that's just, you know, them trying to be fancy, but I feel like it's actually a hint towards that this is like an opening segment, because if you go back to Breath of the Wild 1, the opening segment is also a light, and then Link wakes up, Zelda's trying to talk to him, and that's his awakening from his 100-year slumber. So what if, you know, that light thing is meant to sort of imply that, hey, this is the beginning of the actual gameplay footage, which, by the way, is the first time we actually see gameplay footage from Breath of the Wild 2. Like, this opening part right here where Link is falling, it's the first actual true gameplay footage we see, right? We didn't get any actual gameplay footage from the first trailer, and the beginning of this trailer was all the red wreckage of Ganondorf, and then Link falling through the sky, which is gameplay. So,
well, also notice how in all the other shots in the sky he has equipment, but in that shot he does not. So that's probably before you collect a sword, and he doesn't even have a shield. In all the other ones he does at least have a shield or a bow or something, but he's just still completely like vanilla.
Yeah, so I almost could feel like, because we were earlier we were kind of speculating like where is he jumping from, because it's like higher than all these already super high up places. What if where he jumped up from is actually the same place as, hold on guys, I want to show you, there's that one shot that I showed earlier here. What if that place he jumped up from is also the same place as where Link seems to be lying down here? Just kind of supporting my theory here that he had some recovery periods, someone treated him, and to your point, Don, he has no equipment. He jumps up from this very high up island where he's treated, and he's like, and they give him a mission. It's like, hey, go out, explore this area a little bit, and that's what leads us to that opening segment where he's jumping down with no equipment. Like, this could be the Great Plateau equivalent.
Well, after this hand possession thing, he has to be taken to the sky somehow. And what you mentioned before, the reverse droplet, I think probably that's just the way to travel between the surface and the islands.
Yeah.
I don't think it has any more merits than that. The whole reversal thing, maybe people look a bit too deep into that. Cause
I don't think it's reversed.
Yeah, I don't want it to be.
Shimmying through, and then his arms and kind of like pushing off. It looks like he's just he's turning into he's becoming one with the water and rising up.
Like, just the interesting thing is that you could argue it's like a reverse raindrop, and raindrops come from the sky, from the clouds, which it doesn't have to mean time travel. It could just be just that. Hey, this raindrop, you're taking a raindrop which came from the clouds. You're going to the clouds.
The droplet itself is also way smaller than the pool before it, like
interesting point.
When there's like way more of that liquid inside that thing than
it's condensed
before that. Like it becomes one small little droplet, so it's definitely not like a natural thing that's happening here. That's for sure. I don't think it has anything to do with time travel. Personally, as of right now, at the beginning when the trailer was brand new, I was on board with that. I was like, oh yeah, you can see, you know, themes of things being in reverse, and the music is weird and reversed, like, and Link is wearing this ancient clothing. But the more I start looking into it and really analyze the trailer, I keep seeing new things where I'm like, that cannot be time travel. That can easily be explained if you and there's counter evidence for it as well, you know.
We see, like, for example, there's like windmills at one part that show that this seems to sort of match up with previous the same Hyrule from Breath of the Wild. I guess the thing with Zelda is that in general, I think Zelda theorists or Zelda fans always kind of jump to time because there's a history of time travel, but I also feel like the Zelda team is fully aware of that, and they don't want to fall back on the same types of mechanics. They want to do things a little different. So personally, while I'm okay with there being elements of time travel throughout the game, I don't want it to be a situation where you're just going back in time all the time. Like, if you were to do it, it would have to be something that really changes things around. Like one of the coolest forms of time travel I've ever seen in video games was in Skyward Sword. When you had the dungeon, they had to carry around this time shift stone that literally changed the period of time you were in within a certain radius. Like that was just kind of mind-blowing sort of puzzles there, right? Like that would be really cool. But and maybe that could happen in isolated environments, but I don't think you're going back in time to the sacred realm. Like it is possible, but I
think it's more just a different traveling between worlds is much more interesting in this case, because if you remember, we just had Age of Calamity, which had time, like the whole plot was revolved around time travel. We're gonna have Skyward Sword HD very soon, which features time travel very heavily. Yeah, not just the time shift stones, but also the Gate of Time and stuff. We already had Ocarina of Time, obviously, so we already have 2 games which were released or are about to release very closely to each other, both featuring time travel. It's too obvious that they will do it again. Like,
well, you would also make the argument that there's going to be a lot of links between Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild 2, and perhaps them working on Skyward Sword is also giving them an opportunity to have a little bit more perspective on some mechanics they may try out in Breath of the Wild 2, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there's a counter argument there. But I do agree with you that I personally don't think that the Sky Realm, right, is necessarily, like, in the past and Link goes going into the past. Like, maybe, but to your point, like, we've seen shots that seem to suggest otherwise already. But I do want to kind of get to that, actually, because there's some interesting, like, shots that I at first didn't realize. But, like, for example, the Deku Tree is missing, apparently.
Yeah, that's
what?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to quickly clarify. I'm not saying there's not going to be time travel in the game. I'm just saying that the evidence presented thus far is not really convincing me right now. Like there's like, oh, the Song of Time is hidden in the music of the trailer, and when you actually look at the theory at the video, you're like, no, no, this is not. You're stretching it, like, because there was one guy who had the Song of Time. Okay. The main theme of the new trailer is supposedly the Song of Time. But then when you look at the video, it's only the tail end of the Song of Time, like the least recognizable part of the Song of Time.
Mm-hmm. It could be a hint, maybe.
Yeah. Well,
it's not convincing, but it's not
he
impossible.
He also ignores like the fact that there's a double note at the end. He just doesn't play that one. He just conveniently does like only that one, and you know. Because we all know what the Song of Time sounds like.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you know, none of the evidence I've seen so far is like, yes, this is confirmed. There will be time travel.
Yeah. No, I don't think anything. I think you're right. I don't think there's anything in that trailer that necessarily.
I got it. Here's the subtitle for the next game: Legend of Zelda: Land Before Time.
Land Before Time.
There's gonna be dinosaurs in the Sky Realm. And you go back in time. That would actually be really cool. Just saying, like, I would be if there were to actually be dinosaurs that you actually interact with in these sky islands, and you go back in time to do it. Like, that would be like a really cool thing. I do not believe that for a second, but you know, just kind of funny to think about.
That would be interesting. Oh,
but yeah, like you said, the Deku Tree. Strange, and it's not the draw distance. As far as I've tested, it's not draw distance. You should be able to see him from that point.
You can see the Deku Tree from everywhere on the map. It's one of those things that you can just see. So I don't agree with that.
It's
like you can
separate
see
little buildings. They sometimes load them later, but
right. With the first technically not the first, right, because there was the Zelda U trailer, but the first trailer where they gave us like the title of Breath of the Wild, we could tell that there was something walking on Death Mountain, and you were like on all the other side of the map. It was just crazy because at the time we didn't know about the Divine Beast or anything, and we just knew that there was this giant thing that was like a big chunk of Death Mountain just walking around, which was just scary to think about before when we had no idea what it was. Like, the fact they were doing stuff like that with like one of the first trailers for Breath of the Wild 1, I have a hard time believing that they would just clean off the Deku Tree when it's not that far off from Hyrule Castle, which is in plain sight in a lot of different shots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's too like obviously there's gonna be little secrets hidden in that trailer,
right?
The biggest thing is like, are we able to find them all and interpret them in the right way? Because, like I said, when the Deku Tree missing was seen, the first few theories that came out was like, oh, it's time travel. See, time travel. The Deku Tree hasn't been born yet, and then you're like, yeah, but Lon Lon Ranch is there. And you can see Akala Citadel in the background. Right. Why are those there?
Yeah, great point.
There's a lot of conflicting information in that shot alone, because Death Mountain at the same time is not spewing lava for some reason. It's like in a dormant state.
Now I will say this about the lawn, like the Akala Citadel. That's hard to dispute, but the Lon Lon Ranch thing is interesting because the Deku Tree in Ocarina of Time does die, and there is the sapling that comes afterwards. So theoretically, right, like maybe it's just the sapling that's there. Like it's not gone, it just hasn't gotten big enough yet so it can be seen. Like, you know, that's maybe a possibility. I don't really believe that. But you know, just saying that conceivably we could see like a younger Deku Tree, and maybe that's, if it is going in the past, maybe that's why it's not visible.
Right.
Yeah. Well, like I'm saying, like those two things like just heavily conflict with each other, because the Deku Tree is indeed missing. Death Mountain is for some reason dormant. There's no lava coming down.
Yeah,
those two elements, if it was only those two elements, we could have said, yeah, there's a good chance that maybe there will be time travel involved. We're going back so far that all that stuff doesn't exist. But that's going further back
than maybe Skyward Sword. Because like there's always been like some sort of giant tree, right? So so I don't, like in Skyward Sword is a giant tree. It's not called the Deku Tree, but there's a giant tree. And then also Elden Mountain, which isn't called Death Mountain yet, but there's still this mountain with volcanic activity and the dragon nearby. Like there's something else happened. I don't think it's time travel.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the ruins of Lon Lon Ranch, or the ranch ruins, they technically they don't call it Lon Lon Ranch in that game, but they are there in the exact same state as they were in the present, and that doesn't make any sense, because if it takes place like far in the past, either that ranch should not be built yet. Yeah, either that ranch should not be built yet, or it should be still intact, because the calamity hasn't happened yet. But we don't see that, so I think you even commented on my video about that, Andre. You said like maybe it just got taken up into the sky, the Deku Tree.
Maybe.
Or yeah.
So here's an interesting thing. Like, and this kind of goes back to where it's all circular, right? Like there's a lot of these different things can connect, right? So we're exploring the Sky Realm, and presumably there's something special about this that may be important to how we defeat Ganondorf. Maybe we're collecting the Triforce of Courage, you know? But maybe also there is an arc where we have to restore the Master Sword or retrieve it in some way, right? Maybe that's Zelda's job. Who knows? What if Zelda is playable? We don't know. Which we could be cool. That's a whole other thing we could talk about, but like there's things that they need to be built up, and I think are we kind of in agreement that there's going to be some sort of return of dungeons? Like we do see that shot where there is this dragon-looking head, maybe a zone item, but it's an item, which would be something before Breath of the Wild. Like we got items like, you know, dungeon items, special dungeon items. That's what it kind of looks like, because it's attached to the shield. It's not like your typical sort of like sword weapon or shield weapon or bow weapon, or even the special rune replacement power that we're seeing with the right hand. It's on the left shield, so it doesn't look like it's even necessarily related to that. And we're in a room that has some sort of weird gelatinous creature, maybe a like maybe something else, but right behind it there is like an altar or a pedestal that looks like it would have a chest like sort of appear on it, which is very dungeon, classical Zelda dungeon-esque, right? You have a special item, you defeat an enemy, chest appears. So, you know, maybe there's something to that, and Link will explore a lot of these areas in the sky. But going back to, I'm gonna get to a point here. So, but what if, yeah, maybe some elements rise to the sky, like maybe Korok Forest and things of that nature, and what some of these new islands, maybe it's like them revealing different temples and dungeons that are needed to either A, restore the Master Sword, or collect shards of the Triforce, which is how all classical dungeons have been used in previous Zelda games.
Yeah. I think we're going to see the return of dungeons. It's obviously, that was one of the big things for fans from Breath of the Wild. They're like, man, we love this game so much, but we miss traditional dungeons. And we know that items were something that they did explore at one point with Breath of the Wild. They, Eiji Aonuma talked about the hook shot and how it didn't make it in, but it was something they experimented with. And then in creating a champion, you could see they experimented with concept art with the flying beetle and the bomb cannon, and that kind of your arm that was kind of like makeshift. It showed a hammer on the arm as well. So I think it's just something that just didn't really make it into the time frame with the first game, but something that they're able to now better conceptualize and incorporate it in the game while still keeping that freedom of go where you want when you want.
I like that you brought that up, because in some of that concept art, we also see that the Link they envisioned at the time had something wrong with his face. And what a lot of people have noted with this trailer is that we don't get a good look of Link's face, especially in the sky. Now, some people have jumped to theorizing that maybe this person isn't Link. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I haven't noticed any hard evidence that says otherwise. Some people have suggested it's Zelda, and that part I sort of hard disagree with, because one, the person is his chest is exposed, so I don't think Nintendo would do that for Zelda. So there's that, and then also the hand part. I don't think they're gonna have the exact same kind of injury and the exact same kind of like thing on their hand. I think if Zelda's playable, she's gonna play a very different style of role. It's not gonna be like Zelda wielding the Master Sword, having monstrous Herculean strength. Like she's. I think she could be playable, maybe, but it would be something entirely different. And again, I'm not even convinced that she would be playable. I just think it's a small possibility.
Also, with that flame shield with the head on it is so cool.
Yeah, super cool.
I'm so excited to check that thing out and play with it.
And it looks like it might use magic.
Yeah,
like it does have some of the green energy from the hand, right? Like maybe there's a magic meter.
I'd be down for the return of the magic meter. Yeah, like some of those old staples, I think would fit really well into the Breath of the Wild world. But I also wonder if maybe, because obviously the first game introduced, upgrading your armor sets, the different tiers of your armor sets. Who knows? Maybe there's weapon modifications.
I mean, that's something they had in Skyward Sword. So
yeah, Skyward Sword did it. So maybe that's something that they're bringing back. It would be really cool if there was a shield that had like an ability, but then you modify it and then it attaches the lizard head with the fire that comes out. And
maybe at first it's a flamethrower. Maybe down the road it's like a flame beam or a flame explosion, or it's like maybe Din's fire, where it creates a fire force field, and you have different options. Like there's a lot of different ways you can go about in terms of like upgrading some of these things.
Yeah,
but I do want to kind of go back, because I want your opinion. I tangented, but do you guys think, is there a reason why we don't see Link's face in those sky shots, or do you just think that's just because there's no apparent reason besides just they want to just show gameplay, or do you think there's some sort of story reason as to why they don't show Link's face in the trailer?
It could definitely just be a coincidence, obviously. Because if you look at the original 2016 trailer for Breath of the Wild, they also don't show his face much. Like only like 2 times. When I think when he's cooking, and one very brief flash where he's standing on one of the Sheikah towers. Which was also the same trailer where we got the reveal, like the name Breath of the Wild was revealed first. So, it's hard to say. That was also mostly a gameplay trailer.
Yeah.
It kind of follows the same trend, because 2014, the reveal trailer for Breath of the Wild was only cinematics, no gameplay. Then 2016 came along, and we had some small little things in between, but that was when the game was still in very early stages. But like that was the first proper trailer after the 2014 reveal, and that was mostly gameplay, almost no cinematics, at least not story-wise. And I feel like these two trailers were very similar, because the first trailer didn't have any gameplay visible.
Yeah.
It was all
Yeah.
cinematics.
Yeah.
So, it could just be that. But I still think it was a bit suspicious, like even when he flies past the camera, he's purposely looking to the other side. When he does the backflip, it's only his left side of his face, not the side where his arm has been inflicted.
It would be
I
interesting if like corruption builds up over time or something.
Well, I think it was very purposeful that they hid his face. I think that there is something with the eye, like what we saw in the concept art from Creating a Champion. And one reason why I think it would make sense for him to have something up with his eye is because, well, we no longer have the Sheikah Slate, and a huge part of Breath of the Wild was getting onto a big vantage point, and you'd mark a spot on the map with the Sheikah Slate. How are you marking stuff now? It would be interesting if you had a Zonai eye or whatever it is.
I like that.
It enhances
That's
your
cool.
ability. That part of what was so amazing about Breath of the Wild was getting up high and just that sense of discovery, not needing icons to tell you where you should go next. You'd literally just look and be like, what's that over there? And mark it on your Sheikah Slate. So if we don't have a Sheikah Slate, that's another way to, scan the horizon, and discover things.
Well, in general, I'm very curious. Like, obviously, very, very good point. I didn't even think about that. I did do a video where I conceptualized that idea about, like, maybe one of his eyes is like a malice eye, or like he's partially possessed by Ganondorf, or his eye is just damaged in some way, and they fixed it up using, I don't know. But I never actually thought about what the implications of that would be. I thought it would just be aesthetically like cool to see, like, oh god, he's been hurt really bad, like his face even. But now that you mention it, that is very interesting, and I'm also very curious how the inventory and the map is gonna work, because Sheikah Slate also means everything was done through the Sheikah Slate in the other game, in Breath of the Wild.
Yep.
I was thinking a couple things. So one, I kind of like the idea that it would be like an eye thing, but I don't think it's going to be like a thing where his eyes like gruesome or like bloodied or like demonic even. I think it could be something where maybe we do notice like a little bit of a different change, like it is a little bit greenish, like there's something about it. But if you were to see Link, you're not going to be like, oh my god, there's something wrong with him. You're just going to be like, oh, he has like a special green eye, but it still looks kind of like an endearing Link. Like it's not going to look, because I remember your was it your thumbnail, Don, where you had like the demon eye, right? Like it looked really cool, but I don't think Nintendo would have Link running around with a demon eye, like not that gruesome looking throughout the game, right? Like they want Link to have kind of like a cute look, It doesn't seem like they've gone away from that with this game either. So
no, I don't expect that. It was just one example I just presented. But like, if you think about it, if that hand thing that goes into his body, if that's a spirit of some other being, maybe one of his eyes just is a different color now, like green. Like he has one green.
A green Sharingan.
Because that is a pretty popular thing for Japanese artists to do. Like, if you look at anime, they often do the two different eye colors thing. Mm-hmm. So,
and you have special ocular powers. Like could be something to that.
I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I'm curious what you guys think. I'm not sure Nintendo would, or they'd do that with this one. But do you think there's a possibility that this green energy that's in your hand is the spirit of this character that's holding Ganondorf down, and that it could possibly not just serve as your new abilities, but also a companion to some extent? Or do you think they're done with companions?
I personally hope not. Or if they do it, that it stays silent for like 99.99% of the game, because I don't want another Fi situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't know if that thing is sentient, yes or no. But because in a way, in Breath of the Wild, Link had 4 champion spirits inside of him when he was walking around. You know, at least if you cleared all the divine beasts. So
Yeah.
and they never. The only times they spoke was like, the Rook's protection is ready to roll, and that's pretty much it. And then you get a brief manifestation of them when you use the champion's ability. But that was it. They didn't like intrude into the story. They didn't keep like talking to you.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, I mean,
Hey. Look. Hey. Look.
Yeah, I feel like Nintendo's done it really well at times. Like, I think Midna and Lineback are examples of great, companion characters. But they've also done Fi and Navi, who are not so great companion characters.
They're endearing for different reasons.
And they have acknowledged that, because I think they confirmed that they did change that in Skyward Sword HD. They were like, they're gonna make tweaks to that, or they've already done that.
Hopefully they're significant. My favorite, I just feel like it's worth noting. My personal favorite, like navigator character is actually Zelda from Breath of the Wild, and she doesn't do very much at all. But at the beginning of the game, she is kind of like your guide, right?
Yeah.
I would like it if maybe that's her role in Breath of the Wild too. Now, I don't know exactly how that happens, right? Because you don't know what happens to Zelda. Maybe as we progress in the game, that role sort of changes. Because if you look at the Wind Waker, it wasn't like the navigator role was very consistent, right? Like at first it was Tetra, then it was King of Red Lions, then it was Tetra as Zelda, and then there were parts where it was none of it, Like, I feel like there's a possibility, a small one, that maybe Zelda, as maybe her powers awaken throughout her adventure, she starts to communicate with Link telepathically, right? And maybe it first starts off that whoever saves Link at the beginning, they are the guide, and it transitions to Zelda later into the game. Like, it doesn't have to be one specific character, and also it doesn't really have to be anyone. Like, if whoever's navigator, it's not anything like crazy where they talk to you all the time. It's just probably just for the occasional cutscene.
No, if it follows the trend of Breath of the Wild was very, very much unintrusive compared to every other Zelda games. I'm pretty sure they know that that's something that we appreciated, and they're not just all of a sudden going to go back to Fi type of behavior. So even if that arm does have a sentience to it, it probably won't speak much. Maybe only in cutscenes even, or from time to time.
What do you think of Zelda? Sorry. I know you gotta go. Okay.
Yeah, I gotta head out or else the sun is coming up here.
Okay.
But what did you want to ask us, like the last?
So 2 things for you, real quick, 60 seconds. 1.
Yeah, sure.
How do you like the idea of Zelda herself communicating with you, not like Navi, but just like for the occasional cutscene as you progress throughout the game?
Yeah, that worked in the tutorial section of Breath of the Wild, so I don't see why that wouldn't work. Granted, if she's still alive, obviously.
Yeah, we don't know, right? And then last final thing, and this could be its own whole other discussion, but just some food for thought, because one of the big ideas behind your video is that there's something going on with the Zonai, and it almost seems like, and I know there was a big point Zeltic made as well, that maybe they weren't trying to hold back Ganondorf but support him. But then there's also this speculation maybe Ganondorf betrayed them at some point and they need to be saved. Well, what if that whole environment is in support of Ganondorf, and what if it's actually tied to the Yiga? Because what happened to Koga in Breath of the Wild?
Yeah,
he falls down. He falls down a hole, and he says he does claim he'll get back at you. I don't think he's lying. I think he will have his revenge to some extent. What if the Yiga have built caverns underground in Hyrule and it leads to Ganondorf's chamber?
Well, it could be that they somehow caught wind of that Ganondorf existed, and that's because we still have no idea what that hole was for even. Yeah. There's just this giant freaking hole in the Yiga hideout, and there's no explanation as to why it's there and what they were digging for. It's obviously man-made. We can see that. It has like the edges are like
Very
very
clean.
decorated and clean, and it has tiles around it. So it definitely served a purpose at some point in time, but we don't know. And I'm still hoping that might be where they enter that cave system.
Maybe.
You know,
Maybe.
it kind of makes sense because the Yiga have been defeated at the end of Breath of the Wild. Their hideout has been sacked. Maybe they're just and we also know that their hideout was built in an ancient Gerudo architectural site, which is why those statues are there.
I like that better than his body being under Hyrule Castle, which just seems weird to me.
Yeah. But it's just also like, how does he
Like,
get the
why-
castle
why-
to rise like that from far away? That's kind of the other thing. But also, you know, Arbiter's Grounds is not that far from that location either, right? And that could,
could
theoretically
travel
could have been where
there,
he was sealed.
and
Sorry,
ride off.
Cameron? I missed that.
I was just gonna say he could travel there. He could summon his demon horse and
Maybe.
ride off
Maybe.
after causing. I don't know. It just seems like such a weird place to bury the Lord of Evil. You
Yeah.
know.
But there,
Put
I
'em
guess
right
the
under-
point is, that it's strange, right? But you know, what if there is a link to the Yiga who once were part of the Sheikah, and
Fair enough.
during
Yeah.
that separation, they were the ones that positioned when they were still in line, and everyone thought the Yiga, you know, were Sheikah. Maybe they are the ones that positioned Ganondorf under Hyrule Castle. You know, there's obviously variables here. But Don, I know you gotta go. I didn't mean to like hold you off for too long. But it was great having you on, man.
it's fine.
Guys, please make sure to check out his latest video and his channel. It is linked in the description below. You got any final words, bud?
Well, thank you for having me as always, and was a good talk. Thanks
sure,
to Cameron as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. It was fun.
Thanks for the insight about the eye. That was nice.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. So, well, enjoy the rest of the stream, guys. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Good night, Ben.
Take it easy.
Take care. So let me just adjust the show for a second because you have to set up for.
No problem.
Yeah. I actually do not know how to change it with people not being able to see. So I'll just fix it real quick. Live. There we go. But Cameron, while I mess with the visuals for the podcast, what do you make of that eye thing? Why don't you expand upon that a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I had a few different thoughts about it. Whether it was corruption, I don't necessarily think that the spirit also has to be in his eye. It could have been his eye got damaged during the malice. Maybe Robbie and Pura, you know, they're techies. Maybe they enhance. Maybe they upgrade and fix it up. And that's, you know, your Sheikah eye. Maybe inside the Sheikah slate, you've got your Sheikah eye, and that's how you scan the horizon and mark territories and are checking your menus and inventory. I don't know. I think there's a lot of cool possibilities. They're obviously giving us some really cool abilities for this game. I think abilities that are a lot more unique than we got in the first game already. And I know they haven't shown us everything. There's a lot more surprises. I think they're going a lot bigger with this game. So I think it's possible that we get some cool new mechanics with the hand as well as with the eye.
So on the note of the eye, right? Like what if, and granted it was a trailer, right? But there was no HUD during the gameplay elements, and usually they don't show off the HUD during gameplay. But what if they, and you can actually set it up in Breath of the Wild where you don't really have a HUD. You can do that. But what if they kind of build that into the gameplay? Like, what if they focus more on details that you can see within the environment that look kind of natural, that tell you what's going on? Maybe, like, depending on how the hand looks, you can kind of gauge how much magic you have, right? Maybe you can gauge how much arrows you have based off of the arrows in your quiver. Maybe you could see how much damage you have based off how Link is looking. I don't think they're going to do that. I have a feeling they're probably just going to show us hearts and tell us the numbers, because for some of those things, it's more practical just to know how many arrows you have and things of that nature. But, you know, like, I do like the idea, at least, that maybe that, to your point about the eye, maybe it does give us almost like visors or something. It's
Yeah.
medieval Metroid. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like what if like
Scanning, who knows? Yeah, maybe there's an element of scanning objects in this new realm or whatever these like old holy sky islands are. Who knows? Maybe you're scanning relics looking for clues towards something.
could be.
I mean, this trailer, like, for as quick as it is, there's so many little teases and hints in here. Like, the number of questions just from each shot that you can pull from this trailer is remarkable. But yeah, I don't know. I just like, it's just very weird that they wouldn't show his face in those moments, and I have to imagine it was on purpose.
Yeah, I mean,
I was expecting.
go on.
Oh, go ahead.
No, keep
I was just gonna say that I was fully expecting for us at the very least to get a title for this game.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And Bill Trinan was very quick to say, like, hey, we're not giving you the title because we want to avoid as many spoilers as possible. We don't want to give away too much too soon.
Sure.
That tells me that there's so much that we don't know about this game still.
Yeah, now I think, you know, you have to take that with a grain of salt because PR speak, right? He can't really give away that much in general. But at the same time, I also feel like Bill Train is being as genuine as possible, but while also maintaining NDA, right? But just continuing that train of thought, like, what if what if the title is very suggestive of the game, which it should be. It absolutely should be. Yeah. But, like, for example, what if the title is like Legend of Zelda and the Sacred Realm, or like, you know, something like that, but that name would be very indicative of what's going on. Like, if that was the name, it would probably be a good logical leap to then assume that the latest gameplay trailer with all these sky elements is the Sacred Realm. Yeah. And if that's the Sacred Realm, there's probably the Triforce, and maybe our theory about Link getting the Triforce of power or courage, and Ganondorf with power, and Zelda having her own personal adventure, retraining herself or getting her powers back, and the wisdom, they all convene towards the end, right? Like, there could be some big sort of element like that in there. Even if that's not the title, Sacred Realm, I do feel like there's a good chance that the Triforce is at hand here. But I do kind of want to go back a little bit, because, you know, I was trying to get some of Don's thoughts on the whole Yiga element, but I want to kind of dissect that a little bit more. But in order to do that, I do have to talk a little bit more about Don and Zeltic's theory about what's going on with Ganondorf, and it kind of makes sense. The basic idea, and again, watch their videos, a lot more details and information about the theory and more in those videos, really good videos. Zeltic's is like 20 plus minutes, and MonsterMaze's Don's is like 28, so you got almost a good hour of just really high quality Zelda theory stuff, so check that out. But an element that is discussed is that the tomb or environment that Ganondorf is in the initial trailer isn't necessarily something like what we see in Twilight Princess, where he's chained down, because there are the paintings on the wall that almost seem celebratory of Ganondorf's like military advances. At first, when I saw it, I thought it was at least saying, hey, look, this guy's dangerous, right? And they're telling the tale of his dangers. But why would they show it him that way? It is interesting. Yeah. And then you consider maybe it is the case that the Zonai, which we do see a lot of the ruins that are similar to that all throughout, like maybe there is something to that and the Zonai helped him. Or maybe, you know, they thought that he was a great guy and then he betrayed them, and that's why we see the music in the first trailer, Wonderverse, maybe says, help us, please save us, something like that, which is really dark if true. Like, that's a possibility. But when you factor in that you have this tribe who defected from the Sheikah, who are the Yiga, who worship Ganon, and there's this giant hole in their hideout, and you know, Koga says he'll get back at us someday. Like, I don't think he just says that. I don't think when it comes to like movies and books and video games, if it's a good story, or at least an okay story, if a character says, I will get back at you, or you will rue this day, that point will be addressed. It won't just be like ignored unless if it is, that's what you call like a loose end or a plot hole. So I don't think, I mean, it's possible, we've seen it done before, but I feel like that was like a very intentional, obvious thing. So I do feel like there's a good chance we do see Koga addressed in some way. Granted, Koga's more of a comedic relief, and maybe he's still comedic relief from Breath of the Wild too, but it still is also maybe a hint that the Yiga do play a role in what's going on with Ganondorf here. Maybe it's not even the Yiga themselves, but there were some Sheikah who defected, and some of them went on to become Yiga, but they did create these caverns, which the Yiga have access to, which does lead to Ganondorf's chamber, and there is this tribe that was trying to help and assist Ganondorf, whether it's the Yiga or the Zonai or some sort of mix. Like, it's kind of interesting here because we have several different like potential factions, right? We have the Zonai, who are supposedly long dead. We have the Sheikah, who the monks are really different, but also strangely similar to whatchamacallit, Ganondorf, right? Like they're mummified.
As in like they're almost like redeads.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then you have the Yiga, and actually something just dawned on me, and this is just going back to the whole Triforce connection here, the red, blue, and green, right? So you have the Sheikah, blue energy, right? That's one faction. You have the Zonai, green energy. Maybe they support Link and the Triforce of Courage, another faction. And then you have the silly Yiga, whose colors are red, and they are the faction of Ganondorf and power. Now, considering the theme, the very dark theme they're going with Ganondorf here, I don't think the Yiga specifically are going to be like the representative like force that supports Ganondorf. Like, either they see some serious changes, or maybe it's not so much the Yiga, but maybe more so like the Bokoblins and things, who are also the base forms are red, right? So there could be something there. I guess my point is that there are these different factions. There is like a color that does seem to sort of support like the different characters involved, Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf.
Yeah, I mean, I like this theory a lot. It makes a lot of sense for, you know, Ganondorf is like this like dark god, basically. It only makes sense for him to have followers and people who worship him and believe in him, and having an underground kind of place of operations, temple, place of worship, place of power, is really fitting and would be something really cool to see and explore. And we also know that Ganondorf is a master manipulator. You know, he's done it many times in the past. Zant is a perfect example of a character who got completely manipulated. So I think the idea of maybe a tribe like the Zonai maybe doing some dark and awful things out of manipulation and not even realizing that they had been scammed the whole time, is kind of a fun avenue to take, because Ganondorf is that character. He is that puppet master who will, you know, perverse your mind and you know, seduce you into false promises.
He's got a silver tongue.
You know, yeah.
So I want to get to the chat because I saw a couple things that I found to be interesting points that I think should be addressed. So let me see here. So Swift SVT added me and said or asked, just wondering, why is your go-to example the Sacred Realm? Well, so one of the reasons behind the whole Sacred Realm idea is that when you look at the imagery of in the sky, there's a lot of gold grass, there's a lot of gold trees, there are the what's the name of the arches again? That looks
the Torii Gates.
The Torii Gates, right? Like, they look very similar, and the lore behind that, or the culture behind that, is that they're meant to be like entrances to the heavens, something sacred. And so you have these sacred, these sacred looking archways, golden trees, golden lights, golden grass, all lands in the sky.
Angelic. Very angelic looking.
Exactly. Even Link has a bit of like a Greek-like look, right? So there's a lot of like, it does seem like there's this theme of heavenliness and godliness, right? And when you consider what the Sacred Realm is, let me show you guys a little bit of some photos or concept art of how the Sacred Realm has been sort of shown off in previous games. Okay, nothing. Nope, wrong screen. Hold on. Sorry. Where I didn't have it up. I got it. Give me a second. Here it is. Okay. Now I have the right screen ready. So, anyway, just a Google search here, but you can see like some of this is official concept art, right? Like you have these lands in this. Let me click that higher so you can see that. Like for example, right? Like you see, this is a land that's surrounded by clouds. There's like a celestial body above. These are lands in the sky. You even see like archways. So this is from an old Zelda game. Even this one from a Link Between Worlds, like they're in the Sacred Realm and you see like lands in the sky. So there is some reason that sort of supports his thinking that this is from Ron Lake. So this is like a model, but it's fan stuff. But this is actual concept art, right? Like there have been depictions of the Sacred Realm being islands in the sky. So, you know, there is that. And then also there is a whole Skyward Sword Link and Goddess Hylia being in the sky and things of that nature. So, or at least bringing people to the sky. So I do think that's kind of the thinking, right? Like a lot of that does sort of push me towards thinking maybe this is a Sacred Realm. Now, I'm just suggesting that as a possibility, right? I'm not trying to say that 100% that what we see in the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer is a Sacred Realm. It's just
Right.
it's an environment. It is a realm. Maybe we should just call it the Sky Realm and not necessarily the Sacred Realm, right? Maybe it's the Sky Realm, which again would still have theming of holiness or godliness, because it's the lands and the clouds in general throughout like cultures all throughout the history of mankind have always been sort of themed after some sort of heavenly power or gods or things of that nature. So I don't really think it's a stretch regardless, even if it's not specifically the Sacred Realm that houses the Triforce. But if it is, and there's some reason to think that it might be, it would support the idea of there being some sort of connection here of Link regaining his Triforce, Ganondorf having his Triforce of power, and then maybe also Zelda having her quest to sort of regain her powers, including the Triforce of Wisdom. It makes sense, but it's only just a possibility. That's why it's a theory.
And I think it's a solid theory because you have to ask, like, where did these islands come from? Like, why are they here now? And realms colliding or a realm revealing itself is something that falls into possibility. But I don't know. Like I think as far as what we've seen right now, Sacred Realm seems the safest bet until we see more that makes us feel otherwise.
Yeah, I actually see that Javier had literally the same idea I did. We were talking about, and he said, "I wonder if anyone has realized already that 3 of the tribes in Breath of the Wild all represent the pieces of the Triforce: the Sheikah blue, the Yiga red, and the Zonai green." Yeah, like I do think there's potentially something there with this, right? So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, the Triforce is missing in Breath of the Wild for the most part until the very end, and with the minimal explanation, there's got to be maybe something there. But let's pivot a little bit, Cameron, unless you want to add anything more to this specific concept.
No. Let's pivot.
Let's talk about Zelda herself. We've like touched on it, but we haven't like tackled it. So let's tackle this Zelda issue, because I don't know what's going on. Like, the first trailer, Link and Zelda, they spend a lot of time showing them traveling together, which story-wise makes sense. But then things happen, and we're not sure. There's a shop that makes it look like Link and saves Zelda. Like, they actually grab each other's hands almost. Right. But then, in the second trailer, we see Zelda fall down a big hole. So, are we just going to see Zelda be a damsel in distress again? Because one thing, if there's anything that was made clear by the second trailer, it's that Link and Zelda are separated. They're not together anymore. They start together, they are separated after this big event. And it's clear that Link is playable. Yeah. So does that mean Zelda's not playable because they're separated? Zelda might not be dead. She might not even be the damsel in distress. I hope not. But they do have to answer this in some way. Like, either A, like she's a companion character or she's someone we sort of communicate with throughout the game. We see screenshot, like not screenshots, but like cutscenes with her and eventually get to her. Or maybe she plays part of the story and she's playable. Now the issue with her being playable is that you're then playing two different characters, and how many big open world games do you like transition from one character to another in two entirely different environments? Because it kind of takes away from the connected openness of the world, right? Now maybe as you progress in the game, maybe the world opens up and maybe eventually Link and Zelda do start traveling alongside of each other. Like what if like the halfway point of the game is like a big moment where Link and Zelda reunite, and at that point Zelda is like a companion character or something, or maybe they fight alongside of each other, like they do have their own power. Like Zelda has her magic powers and her science powers, which would just be like, hey, there's something going on there. But Link is Link. Like they could maybe do something like that, but I'm not gonna bank on that. It's hard to say, right? Like what do they actually do? Because sure, we want Zelda to have more of a role, and story-wise that makes sense, but also from a gameplay perspective we have to consider that as well. Like what decisions are they going to make for this to all make sense? Obviously Link is playable, but the question is, will they only have Link playable, or will there be other characters playable like Zelda? And if so, will that take away from the openness of the game, which I think is a really important part of the game?
Yeah. So a few things. One, I don't think Zelda dies.
Damn it. I'm just kidding.
In that if that was a moment when Zelda dies, I don't think that would have been shown.
Yeah, it's
in
anticlimactic.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's meant to build up, suspense and get people talking about what's happening. Two, I don't think it's going to be a thing where you get separated and you play as one character at one part and the other character at another part. Like you said, that creates a linear experience, which the Breath of the Wild series has completely broken away from. That would literally change just your freedom, If you're like, okay, I'm at the part where I have to switch to Zelda now, and finish her route. Now, I do think it's possible that she can serve as some sort of companion character. And when we got that first teaser a couple years back, my guess was that she might be a somewhat playable companion in the way that Atreus was playable in God of War.
Right. That was my dream scenario for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that would be something really new and that would work really well in a Zelda game. Like I'd love to see them tackle it that way. I don't know that they'd go the distance with letting you character swap.
Yeah.
Even if you meet up later. Maybe I'm wrong. So I'm gonna put my money on Zelda is not playable in this game. And that at most, if you do link back up, it would be that kind of God of War Atreus style, like giving commands and stuff.
That's what I think.
In and, shoots an arrow. Or
she's not she's not even really a fighter, right? So that's the other.
This is magic or science,
right? So Zelda does lose her powers at the end of Breath of the Wild 1, but that doesn't mean they're gone forever. It could be the case that throughout Breath of the Wild 2, her powers slowly regain over time, and it could be like a progression for her. So, if they were to do this, but what happens is that Zelda would back up Link with her own powers. But at the same time, when you look at what we've seen so far, is that even necessary? Like, Link already has magical powers from the hand. Like, unfortunately, it looks like Zelda's not playable. And she might not even have that big of a role. Like, she does have a bigger role with the story. But in what way? Do we just have to go and save her?
I hope that's not the case, because one thing I was really looking forward to this after the initial teaser was her being your companion character. It's interesting in the first game, when you were watching the memories, there's a little bit of an animosity towards Link from her, like they don't exactly have the best relationship, and it would just be really cool to see kind of their relationship develop as they're traveling together now in the present after ending the calamity.
Yeah, I really wanted to see that.
The newer and greater danger, what kind of dynamic the two characters have.
Now,
you
I
know?
mean, that doesn't mean that there can't be still a good story told, right? Like to your point, I mean, we still do see that relationship, but it is in cutscenes. So maybe Zelda is lost for a while, and a bit, and perhaps because you do need motive, right? And you could
Right.
argue, oh, but stop killing Ganondorf is motive enough, maybe. But you know, losing Zelda, like if they do spend a good portion of the beginning of the game to show off this relationship between Link and Zelda, and then you lose her, you know, that makes the loss feel some impact when you want to save her, right? But don't make saving her like the big goal. I don't want that because they continue to do that. You can still save her, right? But only in moments. I want Zelda to have her own big moments too. So maybe throughout the game, once things start to open up, you eventually do save her. It's a big moment, and then she's just positioned somewhere. Maybe she's at Castletown, right? Or maybe she's in Hateno, and she's just related to a lot of really important side quests, and you kind of go back to that town and interact with her, and then you know she plays a role in some major story beats, and that's enough because you still get a lot of cutscenes with her, you get a lot of interaction with her throughout the game, and maybe she is like a pseudo navigator, not in the sense that she's like Navi or saying hey, but you know, occasionally, you know, her telepathic abilities open up throughout the game, and she can talk to you occasionally, and very occasionally for story beats, but maybe something like that could happen. I could see that, but at this point, I think it'd be. I'm not gonna make any bets on her being playable. Have an actor role in the story, yes, but not being playable.
I mean, you never know. You never know. But yeah, like based on what we're saying right now, I just don't think it's likely. At least not likely more than the caliber of what we got in God of War. So
yeah. But again, even with that, because Link already has the magic hand, it's like it seems maybe redundant because I don't think Zelda's going to be the archer here. We already see Link have both sword and arrow, and a crazy fire weapon and magic.
Unless I just had a thought though. So there's that scene where you and her are going through that crypt or whatever, the temple or whatever it is. I mean, they could throw in elements like we've seen in previous Zeldas, like Wind Waker. You know, when you're, I believe it's not the Tower of the Gods. Which dungeon is it?
There's the Earth and Wind temples that you play. You explore certain dungeons with particular characters, Maker and Medley.
Yeah, Medley. Thank you. Unless they did something like that, where you know there's like two people standing on pressure plates, where you have to kind of like use another character to solve a puzzle together, like Gooigi and Luigi. But I don't know. I mean, it's something they've done before.
This is all just like Portal in. Like like maybe.
I mean, you don't know. Maybe she gets some abilities from this same race that helps Link.
Yeah,
but
it's tough.
I have a big story question for you that I was kind of thinking of when MonsterMaze was talking about like how he thinks that this could be the end of the line for Ganondorf. Like this is the game where we kill him for good. That would be a very historic thing for the series because this has been kind of like the tried and true villain.
Ganondorf. We keep thinking Ganondorf dies. Like in Twilight Princess, it looks like he dies. Right, and get in Ocarina of Time, he's sealed away.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Ocarina of Time creates 3 different timeline splits, right? And one of them, Link dies, and that leads to like a Link to the Past and a Link Between Worlds, and that's where like Ganon takes over, which is why you see Ganon being the main persona in that timeline of games, a lot of the 2D games, and not Ganondorf, because he just maintained that form once he conquered everything. But then the other 2 timelines, the adult and child timelines, I want to say, yes, the child timeline leads to Majora's Mask. Ganondorf is still sealed, but then some time passes, Ganondorf escapes, and then you have Twilight Princess, right? And in there, it looks like you kill him. It looks like you kill him, right? Like he gets stabbed through the chest, and you assume he's dead. But then in the Wind Waker, which is a separate timeline where Link was gone because Zelda sent her Link to the past, the child timeline. I know it's confusing, but in that timeline, there was no Link. So eventually, Ganondorf came and broke the seal and destroyed Hyrule, right? And then
Yep.
the gods covered it with water. But in that one, he's encased in stone with the Master Sword, and presumably he's done there because the entire land is covered in water, right? Like Hyrule's washed away forever, presumably. So, you know, it's hard to say, like, what's going on with Ganondorf here. Maybe it's a different Ganondorf. I don't think so, because this Ganondorf is shown to survive. I think my speculation that it is the Twilight Princess Ganondorf and it's like a corpse, but you know his look is different, so maybe he is a reincarnation.
Well, I'm curious. I'm just curious
I do think they can kill him, but it's just kind of like maybe.
So, well,
I don't know.
The point that I want to get at, and I mean this might sound absolutely crazy, but it's also like hard to imagine Zelda without Ganondorf because it's been such a staple of the series. But if they did do that ultimate finish, like this is the end of this character officially. We finally destroyed him. I'm curious if they could go the route of Link dying as well, the ultimate sacrifice, because there's this curse, there's this vicious cycle of always the chosen hero and the Dark Lord Ganon returning. Hyrule is stuck in this vicious cycle that Demise has cursed upon the land. What if it takes the ultimate sacrifice to break the curse forever, save Hyrule forever? What if Link and Ganondorf have to die for Hyrule to finally be at peace?
Forever?
Well, I mean, this would be the end of a timeline, but of course there's so many more.
They can just go back in time.
Yeah. There's so many different timelines.
Well, like, I mean, so that's the thing. Like, regardless of what happens story-wise, they can go back in time, they can go to another timeline, and there can still be a Link and there can still be a Ganondorf, right? But so firstly, just to I guess I didn't clearly answer your question before. Like, yes, I do think they could kill Ganondorf. I actually love the idea of Ganondorf actually being killed and not sealed. I actually always get kind of annoyed when they just seal him. Like, damn it, he's gonna break out of that seal a few hundred years from now, and the next Link's gonna have to deal with this dude. Just kill him. Like, actually kill him. Right? So I want them to actually kill him this time. Right? I think they could do that. Which is why I thought the whole lich thing that MonsterMaze was talking about on his channel was interesting, because it was the idea behind a lich is that there is like an item that their soul is attached to. You destroy that item, they die. So it would be interesting to see if they could do something like that. And actually, you can make the argument that that's what happens in the Wind Waker. Link stabs Ganondorf through the head, through the gem on his head, which could be maybe that special item, and he's dead. Like, maybe that's what it is, because in the Wind Waker, they make sure to clarify that he's a wizard. He's an evil, powerful wizard, which is lich-like. So, you know, maybe there's something to that. In Twilight Princess, he gets stabbed through the chest, which is just the same injury he got when he was imprisoned, right, at Arbiter's grounds. So maybe this time they just break that glowy gem that is on him in the trailers for Breath of the Wild. So there could be something there. But in terms of Link dying, I don't see it happening, because I feel like it would be unprecedented to see it happen. But also they could always just bring back there could be another reincarnation of Link. I also don't necessarily love the idea of the cycle being broken forever, because you know, I want there to always be the potential the story can continue. So even if Ganondorf is dead in that particular timeline, that far into the timeline, that doesn't mean that there can't be another evil that is resurrected that still carries that spirit of hatred, right? And we've seen it in different side Zelda games. Like some of the handheld Zelda games have, like Malladus, for example, right? Like there are other characters that have been villains that are arguably another incarnation of Demise. It's not just Ganondorf. Ganondorf's just a big main one that we usually see, at least for the big 3D Zelda games. I wouldn't mind there being a big 3D Zelda game that focuses on another villain. I mean, look at Majora's Mask, and that was great. So they could do that. And you could argue Breath of the Wild wasn't specifically Ganondorf, it was Calamity Ganon. And in Twilight Princess, it's Zant for most of the game. They're like, oh no, it's actually Ganondorf, right? Like it was a curveball, but ultimately it was Ganondorf at the end. I didn't mind that. Wind Waker, yes, it's Ganon, but I mean the way they handled Ganon in that one was just so cool. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll tell you that because Link and Zelda are from another time, like they're survivors from another time. All the people, most of the people they knew are dead. I do think there's something poetic to the idea of them sacrificing themselves for the future generations, and but I think they both would have to die. If one lives, then it's a tragedy.
Right, that is true.
Which I know that seems weird, but
you make a really good point, and they
Yeah.
could bring them back, and it could just break the cycle of Demise's curse. But to your point, like, just because we're not getting another Ganon or another Ganondorf, for that matter, doesn't mean that other evils won't arise.
So maybe they can break
know?
the cycle, specifically Ganondorf, right? They stop the calamity. Like that is, so I actually believe that's what's going to happen. I think Breath of the Wild 2, they clean out that source. It's not sealed, right? They Link and Zelda will completely stop this Ganondorf for good. That doesn't mean that a couple thousand years later there won't be another incarnation of hatred, but they stop this Ganondorf, and the Ganondorf cycle is done, and this consistent, repeated sort of calamity that occurs, it sort of is this source of foreboding for the entire land, that's gone. But you know, yin and yang, there's always good and evil, right? But yeah, I can kind of see that.
And I'd love to see more villains take center stage in future Zelda games.
Sure.
They've done such a good job with some of the side villains. I mean, Skyward Sword HD is coming out soon. I think Girahim he wasn't the ultimate villain, but had he been, I think he would have been one of the most interesting villains in Zelda history. He had a very unique personality, but one of my favorite things about him and a character like Zant is I love how they're so present throughout your adventure, antagonizing you and hindering your progression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it would be interesting to see something different like that. So I'm gonna now transition to Q&A, unless there's like a major point you want to address, Cameron, before we close things out. I mean, you can still bring stuff up. We're not done, but
yeah. No, I had one thing that I wanted to ask you about, just because. But
yeah, guys, if you want to start like focusing on putting out questions and points, we'll get to that after we talk about this part.
Just because some of the wording after the trailer. So, obviously, you and I were both wrong. You and I were very specific in that we believed that Zelda was coming out this holiday time around.
I kept that prediction, but I mean, I feel like we both knew that it was always a good possibility it would come later because it's Zelda. But go on.
Yeah. But I found Eiji Aonuma's choice of words interesting when he said 2022, because he didn't say the game is set for release sometime in 2022. I forget what he said exactly, but he said we're hoping for a 2022 release.
Yeah.
As in, we might not be getting it next year. There could be another delay. Like, I just want to be clear about that, because everyone's, talking like, all right, 2022, hopefully in March. We're hoping that this game's coming out in 2022 doesn't tell me we're getting an early 2022.
Yeah.
That tells me they're hoping that the game will go gold and be ready next year. So I'm wondering if that's just something like, looking way too into the language and them just being, cryptic about the game's release, or if it's a little bit more telling that, like, hey, like, the pandemic really slowed things down, and we're working hard to make the best game possible, and we're really hoping to get it out next year.
You know what? So Cameron, I know you can't hear what I'm playing on the stream, but I'm gonna go to that part just to hear his specific wording. So let me set that up for you guys so you can hear it. Give me a second here so I can position that for everyone to see. second, guys. Okay. All right. Right now, I have it's in playing the direct, right? But I'm gonna put on music. So let's go to the Zelda segment here.
All right. Here's the
There we
last
go.
thing we have to show you.
I'm so excited.
This is the sequel to The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. 2 years have passed since we first announced this game, and we've been unable to share anything with you in that time. However, development has been steadily progressing. For today, we've prepared some new footage to show a bit more of the game. Please take a look.
So he says it after the. So I'm gonna go to skip through the trailer.
Yeah, it's like right after.
Right. Okay, so it should be around here.
So,
Man, that
what did you
shot is
think?
so cool.
This time around, the setting for the adventure has been expanded to include the skies above Hyrule. We'd like to ask you to wait a bit longer. We're aiming for a 2022 release, so I hope you'll look forward to it.
I mean,
How was that?
I don't think it's too, like, listening to it again, right? I don't think it's too foreboding necessarily, but I do think that you know, it's.
I mean, I
they're
think
targeting means that they're not. It's 100% happening, but
not set.
it's not set.
Yeah.
But I also feel like this game has to come out next year. It has to come out next year.
I get it. I mean, if they come out and say that it's like, I'm totally cool with this being a late 2022 release. I'm cool with it because
Yeah,
I want.
It's kind of an expectation for me at this point.
Yeah. Like I know some people are hoping for early 2022, but
Yeah, it's not out of the question. I don't want to. After being burned, I don't want to jump on that train right now.
Yeah.
Now, tell you what. If the Switch revision that we've been talking about for so long is confirmed for March 2022, and after Skyward Sword they start showing us a lot more footage for Breath of the Wild 2, then I'll start to change my tune. Like, you could make the argument that they're going to focus on Skyward Sword for now. Once it releases, it gets some breathing room. Then they start marketing Breath of the Wild 2 more significantly. They announce the Switch revision. Like, I mean, they both may be announced. Like, there's a chance, right, that there's like a big direct that shows off like the Switch revision or something, right? Like, maybe it happens months later down the road this year, and that's when they also have a bit more of a Breath of the Wild 2 blowout. Like, that's possible. And maybe it does come out for March 2022, and they're not showing off that much right now because they really want the focus to be on the 2021 stuff, including Skyward Sword. Like, that's possible, but that's just not my feeling right now. Like, it's just I feel like they would have showed off a lot more if it was closer. Like, they didn't give us a name. There was no footage of the game during the treehouse. It was a short trailer. I think it wasn't even shorter than the first trailer. It might have been.
The first trailer gave way more context into like kind of like the mood of the game. This one was very much like just quick clips of in-game.
So
I mean, it gives us a lot, but
yeah, the first trailer is like 96, 98 seconds, right? The second trailer is actually longer. So the first trailer is like 1:26. So the second trailer gives us like 10 more seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think we'll just have to be cautious at this point.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that we don't know what the March game is. We've seen a trend of there being big fiscal year ending games. Legends Arceus comes out in January. The Switch revision, I mean, I can't promise you that it's real, but I can tell you that I believe it's real. And I believe it's coming.
Well,
It's just, timing is just so tricky with these things. So tricky. So I don't know when that's happening or how they're going to position it. It does make sense to have a big Zelda game to sort of be saying it pushes it, but maybe they don't do Zelda. What if it's something else? What if it's Splatoon 3 in March, right? Like, that's not necessarily out of the question. I feel like that kind of makes sense. Like, Splatoon 3 could kind of work. Maybe it's the rumored Donkey Kong game, and it comes out in March, which would be out of left field. I would say that's also not super, super likely, but not out of the question. So there's a few different options here. And again, the Switch version might even still come out this year. According to Bloomberg and Eurogamer, Switch version is supposed to come out this year. Just because they didn't announce it yet doesn't mean it's not coming.
My initial guess for when a Switch revision would be released, before we were hearing reports that it was going to be imminent and before E3, was September. I didn't think we'd see anything before or during E3 until all those reports started flooding, and I was like, well, I guess that makes sense if third parties want to show off games that maybe wouldn't be running on the original model, or if Nintendo was going to do a big Breath of the Wild blowout, they'd want to show it on their new upcoming hardware. But I definitely think it's still coming, and I think it's still possible that we could see it later this year, closer to holiday time.
Right. Yeah. I think it's possible. And going back to we touched on it earlier, but they could just have like a lot of like patches and enhancements for already existing games, because that's going to be a big selling point for the Switch revision, that it enhances your already existing games. And let's point out that PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X launched with pretty much nothing for their lineups. A lot of their lineups were dependent upon just remasters and enhancements of already existing games. Mm-hmm. So if Nintendo does something similar but for a mid-gen refresh, I mean, you know, if just you compare how Sony and Microsoft handled it, it could be similar. It could be very similar. And, you know, there is still Metroid Dread. There is still Shin Megami Tensei 5. I don't think Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is really a good showcase at all for this, but hey, you know, it might still be in 4K. It'll look clean, even though it'll be a very basic looking game. Like, those are all games that would do well.
I think that one's going to push Switch Lights over the holiday.
Switch Lights, right, not Switch Pros. Yeah. But yeah, I totally agree with that. Metroid Dread and Shin Megami Tensei 5, though, I think are pretty graphically impressive games. Like, maybe Shin Megami Tensei 5 is the launch title. You know, like, could be, right? I think I don't think Metroid Dread is impossible either. Metroid Dread, typically, I feel like maybe not, but I think the difference here being that a big draw about the system is the enhancements and things of that nature. So if that all happens, right, maybe it comes out this year, and the Switch version comes out this year to bring this back to Zelda full circle, then there is no rush to get Zelda out in time for the Switch revision. Like, they're not going to do that. I don't think they're going to delay the system a year and a half or a whole year just so they can come out in time for Zelda. Right now, if Zelda's closer to release than we think, and so is revision, they line up pretty close. Like, if they're close, then yes, but if they're not close, then no, they're going to figure something else out. That's just how it's going to work. Even though there's a strong pattern, if they're not close, they're not close. So I think that's a sticking point here. But I'm expecting Breath of the Wild 2 for the holiday, but
I just think it's telling the choice of words. We're aiming for 2022. Right. Obviously, it means that it's not concrete. We also, in the graphic, it just says 2022. No holiday 2022. No early 2022 or summer.
Same thing for Splatoon 3 and Mario Rabbids as well, though, right? So
yes, yeah, fair point. But we did see a lot more of the Rabbids game. Like we saw a good chunk of
and I heard the development team is 3 times larger than the initial development team for Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope. Yeah.
So I think that's more of them just not having a locked release date.
Yeah. I see that as an earlier release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Splatoon 3 as well is another one where, like, they didn't give us a locked release date, but they showed enough of it for me to feel like this, like, they've got these modes down. It's all going to be about just like finishing it up and then doing the polish.
Yeah. Tell you what, we're going to get another Nintendo Direct, like a general Nintendo Direct before the end of the year, I believe. if we go back to normal years, excluding 2020, which is a pandemic year, we usually get like 3 major directs in a year. One around somewhere between January and March, another in June for E3, and another one like September, October. So this time around, I think there will be a Nintendo Direct in either September or October, where we'll get the final Smash character reveal, by the way. But in there, you know, whatever they show off there, that will give us a good understanding in terms of what we should expect for March. Like, that's where we're going to learn about what game will come out to close out the fiscal year, March 2022. Right. If they give us a big focus on Breath of the Wild 2, then maybe that's what it is, right? They'll tell us if it's coming out March 2022 in a September Direct. They will tell us. If they don't tell us a release date by the September Nintendo Direct or October Nintendo Direct, then it is not coming out March 2022. Doesn't matter if they show off gameplay. If they do not give us a date, then it is not happening.
Yeah.
But we'll learn. So I think that's kind of when we'll know a better understanding of where Breath of the Wild 2 is falling. Now, we don't see Breath of the Wild 2 at all. Like, not even any mention of it. You know, then, like...
I mean, they could Game Awards do a blowout trailer for Game Awards.
It's just tricky. It's just tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, they showed off Zelda at E3 2019. They had several directs in between then and now, and so I think they can get away with not showing it off then. Heck, you know what I would love? I would love if they were to give us a teaser for Prime 4 at the Game Awards.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that'd be. Yeah. I mean, there's a good chance it's Zelda, though. Really good chance. But who knows? Metroid Dread's getting a big push by Nintendo 2 now, so hard to say for sure.
How good does Metroid Dread look? I know we're talking Zelda, but I haven't got to talk to you about it. How good does it look?
Oh, dude. Metroid Dread. Yeah. It's the stuff of dreams, my friend. Yeah, yes. I know a lot of people are sleeping on it because it's 2D style, but Metroid Dread...
Don't sleep on it.
...is like the most ambitious 2D game ever.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot with the perspective changes. We talked about it, right? Like, I thought they would have like a lot of first-person elements shown off there. They did. There's even the Omega Can, which goes behind the shoulder. A lot of the cutscenes are very fluid. Samus's movements are a lot quicker now.
Yeah, she's like super nimble and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that is like when I was reacting to it live, I was like, oh my, like, you know, I'm freaking out and stuff. But then once it shows Samus like moving around, just like, oh my gosh, she's so nimble and quick. I loved it.
Yeah, in terms of like 2021 games, that is my most anticipated game. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, me too. Just like the whole ambiance, that kind of like it's such a space suspense game. Like being hunted.
They're going for that dread element, that horror element, or suspense.
I love it. The logo is fantastic and
beautiful.
Like, just like the shocker that Metroid Dread is officially real.
Yeah. Like it was canceled multiple times, and they was like, yeah, we tried multiple times. Like, so the reports were true, but we couldn't do it until now. Yeah.
But I'm excited. Cool. I'm a huge Fusion fan, and some of my favorite moments in Fusion is when you're getting chased, or when you're in like the hallway below and you see the clone like walking. Just those eerie moments of like you're the bounty hunter, but you're being hunted is just really cool. Yeah,
I actually downloaded Fusion on my Wii U eShop recently.
I need to do this game.
So it was an interesting story that came out this week, guys. Sorry, Cameron. I'll just point this out to everyone. But there's an interesting story that came out that ever since Metroid Dread was announced, old Metroid game sales have really picked up. Samus Returns is apparently selling really well. Metroid Zero Mission, which is a remake of the first Metroid on Game Boy Advance, and then Metroid Fusion are the first and second best-selling games on the Wii U eShop. The third game apparently is Brain Age, and I heard somewhere that game is just downloaded because it allows you to like hack stuff or something, so it's not even bought pieces of the game itself. But then the fourth game on the Wii U eShop bestseller list right now is Metroid Prime Trilogy. So there's clearly like a desire for Metroid here. Not to mention, when Metroid was announced, it was the top of the Amazon charts. There weren't too many games that were at the top of the Amazon charts during E3, but Metroid Dread was. And Metroid Dread was at the top of the GameStop pre-orders as well. So there's a lot of signs pointing towards Metroid Dread being a real banger in terms of sales. So, you know, there's hype here.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this on your show multiple times about like how this is an opportunity for Metroid to reach a more mainstream audience. Like, this is the Switch is so successful, it's so popular, it's gotten people back into Nintendo
Sure.
who maybe haven't owned a Nintendo console in a while, or people who haven't gamed in a while. Like, I've met so many people who have Switch Lites or Switches, and like, I haven't had a console since the GameCube, or I haven't had a console since the Nintendo 64. It's all eyes on Switch right now, and I have a really good feeling about Metroid Dread, and an even better feeling now about Prime 4 when we finally get that.
With all the smart decisions they've made with Metroid Dread, I do feel more confident about how Nintendo understands and appreciates Metroid. I think they're going to do a good job with it. Yeah. But I'll tell you this, and we'll transition to Q&A and talk about actual Zelda for the Zelda discussion. But as much as I want to see Breath of the Wild 2 at the Game Awards, there's a chance we don't see it until next year. Because they may focus on something else. Maybe Bayonetta 3, maybe a new Xenoblade game, maybe another project from Monolith Soft. But another option is Metroid Prime 4, as I mentioned earlier. And I think it makes a lot of sense to maybe tease Prime 4 at the Game Awards, because if Metroid Dread is doing this well, and it picks up really great sales and it reviews really well, guess what's going to be talked about during the Game Awards? Metroid Dread. So if Metroid Dread takes a few awards, it gets a few awards, right? Yep. It's the perfect time to announce another game, and why not tie in a Prime 4 teaser? Prime 4, at the very, very latest, they started development of this game early 2019. So end of 2021, they could very conceivably, that would be more than 2.5 years, have a teaser trailer ready. They could give us a teaser. They absolutely could have given us a teaser trailer a while ago. And there's reason to believe that they started development back in late 2018, actually. And and we're assuming that when they restarted development, that they took literally nothing over from the initial project. There may have been some things which might have expedited development. We don't know. Point is, we're not talking about the game coming out. I don't even expect the game to come out next year. But a Prime 4 teaser at the Game Awards to sort of follow up that Metroid momentum, there could be that. And maybe it's not Prime 4, maybe it's Prime Trilogy, something else Metroid I think could be announced before the end of the year. But let me come back to the chat here. I got another super chat here from Taker610. Thank you very much, Taker. Taker asks, what if Zelda could seal Ganon in a sand seal? That would be one heck of a sand seal. So, that'd be funny. Maybe. But getting into the chat, let's see what are some of the points you guys are bringing up here. Okay, so Swift SVT. I've watched a theory video. It said Zelda might be falling in a pit of malice. In the trailer, what if we see a corrupted Zelda as a boss battle and we tried to free her from the malice? So I don't think it's very clear that it's malice, but she is falling down a hole. It's not out of the question that she could be corrupted by malice. And maybe she is a boss fight of some sort. That would be very weird and twisted. But if at that point you beat it and you save her and then she becomes a more integral part of the story, that would be a pretty cool moment. So I'm not convinced that's what's going to happen, but it's definitely an option. It's definitely a direction they could go in.
Yeah. I mean, we've battled Zelda before. We had to do it in Twilight Princess when she was in her puppet.
And then right after that, she was riding on the horse fighting with you.
Yep.
So, man, yeah, Zelda actually fought with you at the end of Twilight Princess. Granted, she wasn't as important to the story compared to other games, but
sure.
I would love to see Zelda have more of a role, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, she's a great character.
Yeah,
she deserves it.
Crystal Gaudio, did the Master Sword fall with Zelda or it broke with Link? So good question. I'm gonna put this up on screen so you guys can see it. So when we look at the trailer, right, there is we can see the Master Sword a little bit, and I didn't realize this at first. It took me a couple views of the trailer before I noticed that there's something going on with the Master Sword. Give me a second. There we go. So if you look carefully, right on the right side of the screen, I'm going frame by frame here. You see a part of the Master Sword right there. And the mouse is consuming a lot of Link's hand, and presumably also the Master Sword. And the Master Sword is a threat towards Ganondorf. So Ganondorf using the mouse to hurt Link and maybe get rid of the Master Sword makes a lot of sense. So something happens here, and I think it's pretty safe to say that the Master Sword is lost, because if you look later into the trailer, we don't see Link with a Master Sword at all. There's not a
Zelda
single...
might have it.
Maybe.
If it goes down the pit with Zelda, and that's part of your search for her.
Right, maybe getting to Zelda gets you the Master Sword, so maybe Zelda becomes a part of the story when to get the Master Sword, because there's always that point where you get the Master Sword, and it isn't necessarily the end of the game, it's just maybe like the second half, right? Maybe that's around where you find Zelda 2. Like, that's possible. We don't see the sword fall down the pit. There's no sign of that, but it doesn't mean it can't fall down the pit.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know, like, when Hyrule Castle rises,
right.
The whole, land could be shaking and it could shimmy off the edge.
Sure, it's also conceivable that pit is still part of the castle rising up. We don't know.
Yeah.
It's also possible that where they are is not under Hyrule Castle, but that it seems like that's what the trailer suggests, but hard to say. But anyway, if you look at the trailer, there's nothing. Link doesn't have a Master Sword. He has a sword here, but that is not the Master Sword. You'll see a better shot of it later.
I love this opening shot so much.
So beautiful.
It's so cool.
But we see Link with a sword on his back. It's just not the Master Sword. It's more of a basic looking sword. Keep in mind, the Master Sword hilt is purple, and none of these shots are of a purple sword. It's more of a basic journeyman sword. So
yeah. I've got a question for you, because this is something that I was really hoping to see, but they don't really give away too much. I was curious if we were going to see new enemies, and obviously there are new
we see
world boss
potentially
enemies
two
in here. Yeah.
But
we're seeing what is possibly world boss enemies or dungeon boss enemies, the bigger
right,
ones.
There's that green golem looking thing with a green Zonai looking energy in the middle. And then of course there's also the it's probably not actually a like, but whatever it is, there's that thing inside, presumably maybe a dungeon. Yeah. The brown gelatinous thing with a parasite looking mouth face.
Yeah. But I'm worried. I'm not worried. I'm curious if we're gonna see the return of some of the classic enemies, I don't know, Redeads.
Well, maybe that thing is a like, or it could be based off some sort of old Zelda enemy, but it's obviously been changed around.
Yeah.
And what if that golem thing is actually a redesign of another old Zelda? I'm trying to remember the stone golems.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You have to use bombs to blow them up. I forget the name of them.
Yep.
Someone in the chat, those. It's very different. It would be entirely different, so maybe not. But it has hands, right? We've seen hand enemies before in different Zelda games, so it's at least a similarity to some previous Zelda enemies. But beyond that, all we see are kind of repurposed stuff. All of the enemies have different their heads have changed a little bit. They have longer horns and stuff like that.
The bokoblins have huge horns now.
Yeah, and then the stone talus is also a bokoblin outpost at the same time, which is really interesting.
Oh, cool.
So it's a nice little remix there. In terms of new enemies, though, I hope so. I feel like lore-wise, it makes sense that there would be, because the malice for the Calamity Ganon left a little bit, so the idea of more enemies sort of coming out of, or creatures in general, not necessarily enemies, but wildlife, which could include enemies, come out of the woodworks, right? And they, we see a lot more creatures from the history of Hyrule, and maybe once Ganondorf resurrects, his stronger influence, now that he's actually alive and on the surface to some extent, that malice is more potent. Maybe that's why the horns are bigger for the bokoblins. Maybe that sort of caused some sort of metamorphosis for other Zelda enemies. Maybe the Lionels become crazy, even crazier than before. And maybe some wildlife becomes enemies as well. Or maybe that just births or resurrects older Zelda enemies that we've seen in the past, And actually, on the note of resurrection, there are those giant skeletons of the Leviathans. What if those each turn into giant bosses?
Oh man, how cool would that be?
Right? And what if in general, there's a big theme of resurrection, and all the classical style, what if throughout Breath of the Wild 2 you revisit older dungeons from older Zelda games, but they're obviously gameplay wise completely different, structure are completely different. There's just some things that are similarities to them, and they sort of reimagine certain boss fights. Like imagine like you go into Death Mountain, and because supposedly the lava's gone, maybe you can actually explore it and get to the Fire Temple, and when you get to the Fire Temple, you'll run into Volvagia, but a resurrected Volvagia, and it's super epic, and it has Malice powering it up. Like imagine, I mean, we see Nature corrupted by the Malice, right? But Nature's not evil, it just has Malice all over it, and you take it off. Right. But what if there was an evil dragon, an evil lava dragon, that had Malice that completely consumed it and then evolved it into this crazy Death Mountain monster? Like, that'd be cool.
Right.
You know, and that's just one of many possibilities. So, you know, I do think there's going to be differences for sure. I don't know if we're going to see it return. We haven't seen evidence of a returning older Zelda enemies besides, you know, before from Breath of the Wild, but I feel like there's a good chance we see some.
What we've seen is very limited, so just because we haven't seen it does not mean there could be redeads, there could be pose.
They're not going to spoil everything immediately. They're just not going to do that. From the first trailer, though, we do see a rat, which I don't think there are any rats in Breath of the Wild, and there's also that buffalo, which kind of supports my theory that maybe there's a lot of returning wildlife in Breath of the Wild. So, you know, that could also extend to some older Zelda enemies. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I got another super chat here from Taker610. Thank you, Taker. Taker asks, what if Breath of the Wild 2 had an Emmy-like antagonist? So if you guys haven't been paying attention to Metroid Dread, what's wrong with you? Go watch that trailer and then all the treehouse footage. But there's this crazy enemy that chases you around certain environments, and you have to run away from it. The idea of having that in Zelda would be interesting. I don't know if they'll do that just because, you know, different design directions and such, and you don't want Nintendo to just use the same gameplay idea for all of their games. But, I mean, actually, you know, the Guardians kind of already did that in Breath of the Wild to an extent. They wouldn't perpetually follow you throughout the entire map, but they could follow you for a decent bit, and you could be a decent amount away, and they still shoot a laser at you, and it just zooms right by you, or you're that unlucky fellow that get hit by a laser like a whole football field away, but it is possible. So I would like to see a replacement for the Guardians, actually, because the Guardians are gone. So maybe there could be something like that. And actually, when I think about it, in Skyward Sword, there were those challenges that had the Guardians that would chase you around too, which were also terrifying.
They were terrifying.
Yeah.
Music in that part was horrifying.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. And their eyes would like glow red, and it was scary. I think, just thinking more about it, I do feel like there's got to be something. Like, if Guardians aren't a thing, there's got to be a replacement for that. That's of things that can kind of chase you a little bit. Not saying they're gonna chase you throughout the entire world, but there will be. They will follow you for a fair bit. Kind of like the Guardians instilled fear in you early on in Breath of the Wild, right? Unless you're like a genius. And obviously a lot of people now know how to play Breath of the Wild, so for a lot of people they've become easy. But at the beginning, for most people, Guardians were this crazy beast that you could just not handle. I would love to see something like that again, to instill a little bit of fear, but also give me something to build up to as well. So hopefully we see something like that. It's an interesting question, Taker. So I thanks for bringing that up. Moving on here in the chat though. Ice Sonic, what if Majora Mask becomes the main villain? That would be entirely left field. I do not expect it at all, but if it happened, there is a way to make it tasteful. So it's not happening. Like, just so you know.
That'd be very left field.
But I'm not opposed to it necessarily. Javier Vasquez, guys, think about it for a second. Should the character representative of the Triforce power die out for good, what reason is there to not also kill off Link and Zelda as well? That would be too hypocritical for the character of Ganondorf to go away only for Link and Zelda to stay. I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily hypocritical, but Ganondorf can't. There needs to be a tremendous effort to kill off Ganondorf. So the thing about Ganondorf, because to your point, Triforce of Power, this dude does not die. He just does not die. They need to speak to that. They need to showcase his power. And in order for Link to succeed, or Link and Zelda to succeed, they need to do something that's crazier than they've ever done before in a Zelda game to take out Ganondorf. So I think there's a way for whereas Link and Zelda can kill him off and for it to be appropriately representative of the great power of Ganondorf, but it's going to require something special, which is exciting because I think they might do something like that. Maybe it requires Link and Zelda to sacrifice themselves. Maybe it simply requires like just a series of epic battles. Like Twilight Princess, the final boss fight was 4 different phases.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool. If Twilight Princess wasn't so easy, I would have thought that would have been pretty darn good. Like the best ending for in terms of like a final fight was Ocarina of Time, in my opinion. It's not really close. Wind Waker has a good final fight, but it's like just one little thing. Ocarina of Time, the build up to him climbing up the long spiral steps, hearing the organ getting louder and louder, just to see Zelda there. You run into this guy and you finally fight him. It's been building up throughout the entire game since you were a kid. It's also okay. My cat's going crazy. No, don't, no. You're not getting on my shoulder. But I can't trust this guy. I just feel like he's gonna jump on me. But anyway, as I was saying, like there's a build up there, right, in Ocarina of Time, and then you find this super epic duel, and at the end he's like and he kind of like blows everything up around you. You think that's it, but then there's this chase downwards out of the castle, and then you think everything is fine, but then there's like it's all quiet, and then all of a sudden Zelda's like, there's like this noise, and Zelda's like, oh, what's that? And you go, and then you get encased in the fire, and then you have this giant final epic battle, and then you slash the guts out of his head. It's pretty cool. Ocarina of Time is a pretty good end to me, so I want them to really have a really nice climactic end there, and having a strong story to really set that up is important.
I feel like with every game that Ganondorf has been in, they always kill it with the finale, like just like the set piece for the final battle.
Ocarina of Time, yes. Wind Waker, yes. Twilight Princess, my only problem was that it was easy. Like the actual,
it was easy.
Like the set
but
piece,
like,
though.
as far as like the set
the
piece
presentation,
and, like,
you're so spot on. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
They
nail it every time. It's always just like these super moody, intense moments. Each one feels different from one another, but they all hit heavily, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. For sure. Talbron, any recurring Zelda characters you guys are expecting, like Tingle, Malon? That is interesting. I haven't really thought about it too much. I like the idea of seeing characters that are like the Breath of the Wild versions of both Tingle and Malon, which we haven't seen in the first Breath of the Wild. So I kind of like the idea. But I think the way it would work is because, again, Link and Zelda repel Calamity Ganon. So, you know, the people of Hyrule, at least for a little while, think that there's peace, right? So with this peace and supposedly, you know, like an attempt of restoration of Hyrule, that there are people from outside the lands that return or surface. Maybe they're in hiding. And people start to live out on the land more. So maybe we see a lot more characters throughout Breath of the Wild 2. And maybe that doesn't include like the modern version of Tingle and the modern version of Malon. And on that note, Malon's father, right? Or whoever is her parents in this generation. Like, I would love to see that. Okay, Cat. No, you're not getting on my shoulder. Nope. It's not happening. Nope.
Welcome to the Cat Cast, everyone.
The Cat Cast. Go away. No. He was adamant to get on my shoulder. It's not happening. I'd
love to see some returning characters. I love seeing familiar faces in Zelda games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I always get excited. I'm like, oh man, it's this character. But for me, the two that I'd want the most is probably, well, Tingle. I'm a big Tingle fan. I'm weird like that. I just think he's funny and goofy. I love that you get his outfit in Breath of the Wild as a bonus costume. but yeah, he's goofy, and I think he fits well into the world. And the other character that I want to see return in many Zeldas, because he's one of my favorite side characters, is obviously the Happy Mask Salesman. There's just something so interesting and mysterious about the character. Like, you don't know if he's with the royal family, you don't know if, like, he's just like this weird kind of all-knowing, I don't know. The guy's awesome. And I want more Happy Mask Salesman.
Yeah, no, it'd be cool to have like a mask side quest too, right? Like maybe like they have some more nods and allusions towards Majora's Mask. Maybe there's even like a dark side quest that has some sort of weird cursed mask, you know? Like that would be super interesting.
I love that idea. I think a side quest would be perfect. Just a small little role to have the character in. Gives you a little bit of a tease, a little bit of a nod to the past, but nothing that's like crucial to the story of what's actually happening in the game.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other like missing characters that would be like really nice to see in the sequel.
I think. Well, there's Dampy.
Gravekeeper. Dampy.
Trying to think who else.
I mean, I said Malon's parents, but I forgot their names. Like, is it like Ingo and Talon?
I think Talon's the dad.
Trying to search it up real quick. Yeah, Talon. Yeah, but there's also his friend who takes it up. Is that Ingo?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I remember the name. I know someone in the chat's brought. Was it?
Oh, the two witches. I forget their names.
Yeah, the ones who supposedly raised Ganondorf.
Yeah, they'd be great, especially because Ganondorf is making his return.
Oh, I was right. His name is Ingo. Okay, I don't feel as bad anymore. Yeah, the witches. What were their names? I don't remember their names. I'm Googling.
I feel like I get confused with the Majora's Mask
Oh,
ones.
okay. Kotake and Koeme.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently their names translate to Little Bamboo and Little Plum. Interesting. Very interesting. But just kind of moving on the chat here. Swift SVT, it probably would have been announced at E3, but what if we get the Zilla Tri-Pack in March? I don't know. I do think Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD are coming. I don't know if it's going to be like a triple pack. They are coming. It's just really kind of a matter of when. And to be totally honest with you, that when could be March, could be February, right? Could also be 3 years from now. We don't know. Keep in mind, like we heard about Skyward Sword HD from the Zelda director himself, Eiji Aonuma, and it was a couple of years later before the game was actually announced. So we gotta be patient with that. Metro Prime Trilogy we've heard about since 2018. It's 2021. We're going to 2022. So I'm not sure. They're gonna want to be careful about how they position the different Zelda games. So at some point, but don't assume it's right around the corner. They might do it, but I don't feel confident in saying that it's too soon, or really soon, I should say. Mike Kleckner, tuning in late. What's up, GameBird Andres? I don't know if you mentioned it already, but since you're on the Zelda topic, how was the Dubious food? It was delicious. I loved it so much. A little. I liked it a little bit, but also hated it. But also it was fine. I was getting a little queasy, but I ate as much as I could.
It was a lot of food. That was a huge portion.
It was a double cake with like pounds of icing and pounds of fondant and other things. It was heavy. It was super heavy. Birdman's saying Zelda could have her missions that were told from Fi, or something like that. Well, like flashbacks maybe, or do you mean like we play like occasional missions from her? there is an idea that is an interesting thing. Like, what if for Zelda, it isn't so much like she's playable throughout the game, but what if there are pockets, not where you get to play with her for hours at a time, but like just occasionally for story beats, there is the occasional story beat where you get to play as her for a little bit. And it's just moments in the game. Most of the time the game is open, but for certain story beats, you do play as Zelda to see her perspective. Like, man, maybe it's like more of a horror thing, right? Like, what if you play as Zelda underground and she doesn't have powers? So she's just kind of like super vulnerable and she's being chased by things underground and she doesn't know what they are. And she gets to a certain point and that's a checkpoint, and then you don't know what happens to her until another 20 hours later when you accomplish something else in the game. There's another little pocket. And these pockets of gameplay, they're not super long. Maybe they're 5 minutes at a time, 5 to 10 minutes at a time, but they're just enough that you get a little bit of extra variety with the gameplay. You get to see Zelda's perspective. And it doesn't really take away from the open world nature of the game. It's really just kind of like an extended playable sort of cutscene. Just an idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I'm just
it would be,
yeah,
I guess, somewhat limiting because during those moments the game would be linear, right? But when you come back to Link, it will be fully open again.
It's just going to be a matter of whether or not the Zelda team is willing to take away, even if it's for brief moments, your freedom to do whatever you want whenever you want.
So let me throw this at you.
What's that?
There is some hint towards that in the trailer, actually. So we talked about it earlier. The little raindrop warp that we appear to see, it's implying that we can't just go to the sky naturally. Like, we have to like teleport there.
Sure.
That's already inherently taking away from the open air nature of the game. Now, I'm going to assume, because this is a sequel to Breath of the Wild, that it's not going to be like that forever, but maybe early on, that's how it works, right? Or maybe it's just magic with the cutscenes and it's just really just a big, tall jump. But, you know, with that in mind, maybe there is a little bit of linear moments in the game like that. But as you progress, the game opens up more and more.
Who knows? I mean, one thing's for sure, we won't be building flying machines anymore because we don't have the Sheikah Slate. So no more.
Well, I'm sure people they'll figure something out with the magic.
Figure something out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it also makes me wonder if a big secret element of the game. You've mentioned this in prior podcasts, Andres, about loft wings. I mean, obviously the glider is a staple, and is obviously going to be very helpful on the ground. If you do get a loft wing, I am assuming it would only be something that you'd be using when you're in, whether it's the Sacred Realm or these sky areas. You wouldn't be using it in lower Hyrule, obviously. But who knows? There could be an element of flying that you eventually attain in the game.
Yeah.
Through a power or a loft wing. We don't know.
Right. I mean, and the other thing is that, like, it's possible that, like, and there are ways to balance it out, because you get the loft wing, it might make everything easy, but what if you can only ride the loft wing for moments? Or what if you don't find the loft wings until later into the game?
Yeah. I mean, the loft wings could have a stamina.
Right, there are animals that you can only ride for, well, it's a little different, but like in Breath of the Wild, you need a lot of stamina to sort of tame an enemy. What if they do something like that, except instead of taming, you just can sort of maintain a loft wing for a little while? Because keep in mind, these loft wings, if they are there, there's a good chance people haven't been riding them, you know?
Yeah.
So...
yeah, the people in Skyward Sword are trained.
Right, so maybe these are wild, and maybe you can ride them in theory, but they are not easy. And they'll kick you off after a little while, and really, just early on in the game, they're just a mechanic to get higher up to places.
Yeah.
Assuming they don't just do all of that with the green warp thing. Let's see here. A new enemy idea, Malice Mites. An interesting one. Swift SVT, maybe there'll be little malice creatures running around. I mean, that's already sort of happened already, so, but like little mites? Yeah, maybe. Light Code Demon H. I thought it was pronounced Volvagia. What'd I say? Volvagia or Volvag? I mean, Volvagia, I think sounds. Oh, no, cat. No. No, I do not want you on my shoulder. He's like forcing himself. No. Get down.
He's got the claws in.
Yeah, he's like clawing my shoulder. No, I do not want you on my shoulder. I'm sorry. I'm busy. No. 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 He's like determined. He's determined. Stop. Down. Get off my shirt. Get off my shirt. No. No. Down. Get down. See, now his claw's stuck in my shirt. Go elsewhere. Spunky little guy. But he's gonna come back. I know it.
Yep.
Moving on though. Nintendo, or maybe a stalker-like enemy for like a specific dungeon that ends up being the dungeon boss. Oh, like, so you're not even talking about like something kind of small. You mean like maybe like something huge that chases you around? Maybe like imagine like you find like a lost forest in the sky and there's like a giant spider monster, for example. It would be kind of like bringing back the spider that would chase you from Twilight Princess, except it wasn't actually in Twilight Princess. It was just in early footage, but never brought it in. That'd be crazy. And like it just chases you throughout this woods. There's like cat hair all over my face now. But yeah, maybe there's something to that. Oh, Nishant Kelkar saying that maybe the green enemy with the hands is a Beamos. That would be a different kind of Beamos, but maybe they could potentially shoot a laser at you. Flippin', do you think someone will die in Breath of the Wild too? Ganondorf will die.
Yes, someone will die.
Yeah. I would love to see more side quests that are very Majora's Mask like, where we're helping people out and some of those people die or they're like grieving. I would love to see some very moody, dark quests like that. So that'd be pretty interesting, which would have death. Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite side quest in Breath of the Wild was obviously building the town. It was the most thought out and stuff. And it was interesting to read recently that like that was supposed to be a much more expansive thing that they just didn't have time for. So it was just limited to that one little area. But them having plans to make a more expansive version of a quest like that makes me hope that the side quests in the second game are a little bit more thought out and more detailed than they were in the first game.
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of hoping they really focused on like the depth of this game and really just like filling in the world with things, like a lot of really cool, interesting side quests.
Yeah.
Majora's Mask did it right. Like I would love to see like that. Like it'd be super cool.
Yeah, I mean, you really felt like you were affecting the characters' lives and stuff. You know? It felt like, you know, the world was changing with you, and so were people's lives.
Now, with the world so big, maybe there could be a few different towns like that, and maybe there's some other interesting side quests that happen throughout in between those towns. But I would love it if they were to have a few towns that were very Clock Town like. Yeah. And so those Clock Town like towns, villages, whatever you want to call them, encampments. Right. Some of those side quests obviously extend out of the towns themselves, but that's how you can kind of fill up the world with like other compelling side quests, because they link back to other locations where there's a story at hand there, right? Be it someone grieving for someone's death, a scientist locked somewhere and we don't know why, we're trying to figure it out, or someone who lost their lover and you're trying to help them figure out what it looked like, what's going on. Like there's a lot of different things that could be done. Birdman. Or probably there will be Loftwings without using the amiibo, but with the amiibo it gives you Zelda's Loftwing. Zelda's Loftwing or Link's Loftwing, absolutely. I mean, that was kind of how it worked for the horse amiibo. For Breath of the Wild, you could get Link, you could get Epona only through the amiibo, but there was a whole bunch of other horses in the game.
Yep.
Let's see here. Nintendo. Maybe you're riding a dragon, which is actually the deity. Your arm is a part of later in the game to fly around the sky. Maybe that, because we do see that the dragons, right, they do go through a portal in Breath of the Wild 1, which is similar to the portal in Skyward Sword, which would answer it would explain why we can't see the islands in the sky, because they are in a different realm, the Sky Realm, and you can only see it from one way, not the other. And maybe the dragons can be ridden there. That would be super interesting. You cannot ride them in Breath of the Wild; they just knock you away. So it would be awesome if they made them a little bit more interactive. Let's see here. And the Shot Kelkar. Another Zelda character that could come back is the Mailman. There is no mailman, is there? So yeah, what if it's a year or two afterwards and there are multiple encampments now in towns and villages, and there is a mailing service now, and did you see the mailman running throughout Hyrule? That would be really neat to see.
That'd be really cool.
Maybe he has a team. Maybe it's not just him. And there's a whole story with that and the drama between the different members of the mailman team. Mike Kleckner, sidebar. Do you think they have a 2022 release so it doesn't steal thunder away from Dread? No. I think like Metroid Dread would have been able to release in October or September, and then Breath of the Wild 2 could have come out like a month later and it would have been fine. Like, there are times where Nintendo will release and publish multiple games in a month towards the holidays. I don't think so. I think like next year we're probably going to see even bigger games come out even closer to each other. Yes, this kind of works out well for Metroid, because right now Metroid is like the really cool new Nintendo game, right? It's like the most exciting one, arguably. So it's getting a lot of attention right now. But no, there's no way Nintendo would have delayed it for that reason. The reason it's not coming out is because it's not ready. And I think a lot of that has to do with COVID. Like, yeah. I think the game was probably pushed up like a whole year because of COVID. Potentially more. Like, I feel like initially Nintendo probably wanted the Switch revision and Breath of the Wild 2 to come out together this year. But that's not happening. Let's see here. Crystal Gaudio. Ganon could break half of Link's shield, and Zelda should call Link on your left. Zelda has a big army versus Ganon's army. Play the final battle jet like Avengers Endgame, having a sacrifice like Iron Man. Maybe. Let's see here. Birdman saying, I'm really hoping it's March 2021 for the sequel. If it's coming in March, then they have 9 more months of development, so maybe. We don't even know how far along they necessarily are, because with trailers, they can show off however much they want. I just think that if they were closer to release, they would have shown off a lot more. Now, you could argue that they were just determined to only show off 2021 stuff, because Splatoon 2 wasn't shown off at all. Triangle Strategy was not shown off at all. There's a lot of games that are in development right now and Nintendo did not show off. There's a Donkey Kong project, which I know some people don't believe is real, but I strongly believe it's real. There's at least 1, maybe 2 projects from Monolith Soft that are in the works we haven't seen. Bayonetta 3, which you know is real, hasn't been shown off. They did not show off Prime 4 yet either. There's a lot of major Nintendo projects that they could have shown that have been in development for at least 2 years, potentially 4, for some of them even 4+ years. They just did not show them off yet. So, it's tough to say. But like we talked about earlier, we'll have a better understanding come the next big direct. That will tell us, they'll give us a better understanding of when it's coming out.
Right.
Yeah, I think we caught up with the chat now. Yellow Kazoo, yeah, we are still going, but I think we've pretty much reached the end here. So, any final thoughts, Cameron, before we call it a night and my cat comes to lacerate my neck?
No, I mean, I think as the days go on and we analyze this trailer more and more, we're probably going to think of things or catch things that we just haven't seen yet, even though I know we've all watched the trailer 100 times already.
I mean,
like,
you could argue there's still things we could like dissect from the first trailer.
Yeah,
and
yeah, totally.
We're working on that one for 2 years.
Yeah. And I know there's stuff that we probably just, we talked about a lot, but I know there's stuff that we probably just missed for this episode.
I don't even think we focused too much on Skyward Sword, right? Like, I think there's made links with that game. And the game's coming out next month, and there is a history of these HD Zelda remasters to have some sort of added detail in there that gives us some sort of hint or pays homage to the next big Zelda game. Comes out less than a month from now, guys. So, you know, we should pay attention to that. There might be something in Skyward Sword HD that could give us more material for Breath of the Wild 2.
True. But yeah, I'm just I'm excited. I'm sure we're gonna see the game again this year. I mean, obviously, it's very possible we won't. You never know. It depends what they want to show us and what they don't want to show us. But I think there's still a lot of stuff we can dissect from what we've seen already before. I think we're gonna continue to hear and see more theories, and I'm just excited for it because the lead up to a new game is one of my favorite things in the world. I love Zelda so much, so you know, I'm ready for the journey.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be fun. There, I have several like theory video ideas. Like, there's a lot of stuff. So stay tuned, guys. Make sure to check out Cameron's channel. It is linked in the description below as well. And MonsterMaze was on earlier. Make sure to check out his channel, also linked in the description below. I got one at here from Birdman. I'll check that before we close things out. Let's see here. Oh, also, Bill did say that the sequel will feel like its own game and not having relation to Majora's Mask as in a dark theme atmosphere. Yeah, Bill did say something like that once we play through the sequel, that it's going to stand on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really feel like all he's trying to say is like, hey, this game's going to be different. Don't worry. Yeah. Thank you, Kazoo, for encouraging likes to the stream. You are the best. Thank you very much. Actually, I got one more thing here from Kleck. I'll get to that, and then we'll call it a night here. What do you think the one thing that will separate Breath of the Wild from Breath of the Wild 2? I know there may be many, but there has to be something that stands out the most. That is a very interesting question. Cameron, can you think of like something about Breath of the Wild 2 that'll make it stand out, like above like the one thing? I guess the part of the issue is that we do not know that much about the game yet in reality, right? One thing that
I think 3 things that come to mind. I don't even know how to pick one.
Right. Well, like one of them is that they're expanding to the skies, and I think a big emphasis with Breath of the Wild 2 is to really expand upon the open air concept, which wouldn't necessarily differentiate it from Breath of the Wild 1. It would just really enhance that experience significantly, right? But I think something that's already sort of separating the game is the fact that there is this whole sky region now. So that is something that, you know, Nintendo obviously is like, hey, look, there's a giant sky region like that. They did that to, you know, excite people, show something new, a new area to explore. So you could argue that, right? The other thing you could argue is the darkness of the game. Like what they're doing with Ganondorf, it's very gruesome, it seems. There's a lot of dark elements there. So, there could be something to that.
Yeah, for me, I guess the sky element was obviously one of them. But my other big one is the gameplay mechanics in this game. They've taken away all your tools from the first game. There's no more Sheikah Slate, no more Magnesis or Cryos or Stasis. That's all gone. The way you play this game, the mechanics and tools you use with your new abilities are completely different than the other game. You could do things in this game that you could never do in the last game. So I think the gameplay loop is going to feel dramatically different, you know?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a good point. The changing, getting rid of the runes, give us the arm powers, like that's going to give us a very fresh experience. The whole different crazy mechanics that will allow us to play around in Hyrule and do all sorts of different kinds of things. That will make it feel really fresh. Hey, Rob is in the chat. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, what's up, dude?
But yes, this is the end of the discussion, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a like, share the stream. Make sure to check out Cameron's channel. Make sure to check out Don's channel, who was here earlier as well. Their channels are linked in the description below. But yeah, that's all for now. But yeah, Zelda stuff, we'll be talking about it for a while. So stay tuned. Take care.
Take it easy, guys.